Chapter 850. Vast Heaven Emperor was stunned for a full breath before he came back to his senses. For a 9-star king, it was considered a long time for him to attack 10 to 20 times in a breath. Vast Heaven Emperor was shocked by Yi Xing's message. After becoming a disciple of the Dark Star Temple, the warriors of the Starry Crescent Land had never returned to the Starry Crescent Land in advance. Only every 100 years, when the Dark Star Temple recruited new disciples, could they pass through the space passage and return to the Starry Crescent Land. However, it had only been 6 years since the last time the Dark Star Holy Palace recruited disciples. Yi Xing had returned from the Dark Star Holy Palace. How was that possible? Vast Heaven Emperor could not help but be shocked. It was too unbelievable. Only true gods could travel between the Starry Crescent Land. Even quasi-gods had to use the void-crossing divine boat. However, the cost of using the void-crossing divine boat to travel between the Starry Crescent Land was shocking. It was no less than the lifetime wealth of an ordinary quasi-god. Yi Xing's arrival on the Dark Star continent had either been personally escorted by a true god expert or a quasi-god expert using a void-crossing divine boat. Regardless of which method it was, Great Emperor Vast Heaven found it hard to believe. Vast Heaven Emperor was once an outer disciple of the Dark Star Holy Palace. He naturally knew how high a true god was and how precious a void-crossing divine boat was. Therefore, Great Monarch Vast Heaven was shocked when he saw Yi Xing's message. After the shock, he began to doubt the authenticity of the message. After a while, Vast Heaven Emperor's communication pearl sent another message. Sect Leader Feng, I was chosen by a true god elder in the Dark Star Holy Palace and was accepted as a disciple. My master knew that the Big Dipper Sword sect was in trouble and sent me here to help the Big Dipper Sword sect. When Yi Xing saw that Vast Heaven Emperor did not reply, he knew that he was already a disciple of the Dark Star Holy Palace. He should have been in the Dark Star Land. His sudden appearance in the Starry Crescent Land was indeed shocking. It was reasonable for Vast Heaven Emperor to be suspicious. Therefore, Yi Xing immediately sent another message. Although Yi Xing was a 4-star king, he could not be compared to a quasi-god. He could not change the situation of the Starry Crescent Land with his own strength. In order to quickly solve the Big Dipper Sword sect's predicament, the only way was to use the Heavenly Bow Continent's legendary weapon. Yi Xing's appearance in the Starry Crescent Land was already shocking enough, and now he had a divine artifact. That was even more shocking. Yi Xing couldn't explain everything one by one, but if he could fabricate a true divinity powerhouse as his master, then everything would make sense. Emperor Vast Sky was excited when he received Yi Xing's message for the second time. Although he was still doubtful, Yi Xing's explanation was reasonable enough to convince him. Emperor Vast Heaven immediately reported the news to Feng Hanqiu and Feng Junyue. Feng Hanqiu and Feng Junyue were equally shocked and overjoyed. If what Yi Xing said was true, then the Big Dipper Sword sect would be saved. Feng Hanqiu immediately made a decision and said, Junyue, you will fight your way out of the city with me and deal with Xingqingji, Feng Hao, and Xian Yuan. Quang Tian, you will seize the opportunity and go to the south of the city to assist Yi Xing, Big Dipper City, East City. Suddenly, the void ruptured, and Feng Hanqiu and Feng Junyue, 2 first Nirvana quasi-gods, emerged from the void. They each took out a divine artifact and charged toward the martial artists of Xingxiang Palace, Demon Ceiling Valley, and Darkeen Palace. Ha! After a few wild laughs, the void ruptured in front of Feng Hanqiu and Feng Junyue, and 3 quasi-gods appeared at the same time. They were Xingqingji, Feng Hao, and Xian Yuan. Quasi-gods were able to travel through the void. As quasi-gods, they could sense it. The moment Feng Hanqiu and Feng Junyue traveled through the void, Xingqingji and the other 2 sensed it and immediately intercepted them. Xingqingji laughed and said, Old Ghost Hanqiu. You want to go to Giant Holy City to help? Ha! No way. Around the Big Dipper City, there was already a reverse teleportation formation. The teleportation formation could not send people out. That was why Xing Qingji, Feng Hao, and Xian Yuan could bring people to surround the Big Dipper city. Xing Qingji and the other two also took out their divine artifacts at the same time and blocked Feng Hanqiu and Feng Junyue's attacks. 3 against 2, they had the upper hand. However, the 3 misjudged Feng Hanqiu and Feng Junyue's intentions. They thought that Feng Hanqiu and Feng Junyue wanted to break out of the encirclement and go to Giant Holy City to help. They did not know that Feng Hanqiu and Feng Junyue were only trying to attract the attention of the 3 so that Vast Heaven Great Emperor could go to the south of the city to help Yixing. As soon as the battle in the east of the city began, Vast Heaven Great Emperor sent a message to Yixing and then led people to charge out of the south of the city. The martial artists that Vast Heaven Great Emperor led were all high-level martial emperors. They were all inner elders of the Big Dipper sword sect. The moment they charged out of the south of the city, they were like a sharp knife that pierced through the blockade formed by the martial artists of Xingxiang Palace, Demon Ceiling Valley, and Darkeen Palace. Feng Guangtian, how dare you leave Big Dipper City? You're digging your own grave. Kill. Kill them all. Leave no one alive. A person yelled. It was a 9-star Great Emperor. Xingxiang Palace, Demon Ceiling Valley, and Darkeen Palace each had a 9-star Great Emperor. They surrounded Big Dipper City. The anti-teleportation formation they had set up was only targeted at the Big Dipper sword sect. Their own teleportation formations were unaffected. Teleportation formations were set up all around Big Dipper City. The martial artists of the 3 major sects could appear anywhere around Big Dipper City in the shortest time possible. Following that, 2 more loud laughs could be heard. The other 9-star Great Sovereign had also arrived. Yixing and Wei Qingxian were hiding outside the south of the city. After receiving Vast Heaven Great Emperor's message, they began to sneak into the city. When they saw that the battle had started, they avoided the area where everyone was fighting and rushed into the inner city. Who's there? A loud yell came from the front. A 7-star Great Emperor flew into the sky and blocked Yixing and Wei Qingxuan's path. This person was wearing Xingxiang Palace's uniform. He should be an inner elder of Xingxiang Palace. Kill! Yixing yelled coldly. Naturally, he would kill anyone from Xingxiang Palace without mercy. Wei Qingxian immediately activated her icy star form and struck out with her palm. Extreme cold chi spread forward like a gale. You're courting death. The 7-star Great Emperor was enraged when he saw that 2 4-star Great Emperors dared to attack him. With a yell, he threw a punch at Wei Qingxian. The fist and palm collided. There was a loud explosion and energy splattered everywhere. The 7-star Great Emperor's expression changed abruptly. The power of the cold chi palm was not weaker than his. What was more terrifying was that the cold chi was like a maggot attached to the bone. It immediately spread to his body through the fist and made him shudder involuntarily. He felt as if the blood in his body had frozen. His body was so cold that he could not keep up with his thoughts. Wu Shixing's arrow intent was attached to his body. He shuttled through the void and instantly appeared in front of the 7-star Great Emperor. He pointed his finger and an arrow shot out. Affected by the cold chi, the 7-star Great Emperor's reaction was greatly slowed. He could only watch as the finger shot towards his head. With a bang, his head exploded. The 7-star Great Emperor died instantly. Chapter 851. With Yixing and Wei Qingxian working together, killing a 7-star king was as easy as flipping their hands. It only took them a blink of an eye. Then, without slowing down, the two continued to rush toward the inner city at a speed of 100 miles per breath. The 3 quasi-gods from Astral Elephant Palace, Demon Ceiling Valley, and Dark Moon Palace were held back by Feng Hanqiu and Feng Junyue. Most of the high-level kings were also attracted by Emperor Vast Sky's team. Therefore, the defense in other areas was naturally weak. The area where Yixing and Wei Qingxian were was actually guarded by a team of Astral Elephant Palace's kings. The 7-star king was the leader of the team. The other kings were focused on the battle in the distance and didn't react in time. The 7-star king was the first to intercept, but he was instantly killed by Yixing and Wei Qingxian. The other kings didn't dare to stop them and fled in fear, hurriedly reporting to 9-star Emperor. When they finished reporting, 9-star Emperor received the news. In a few breaths' time, Yixing and Wei Qingxian had already flown a few hundred miles and reached the edge of the inner city. Yixing and Emperor Vast Sky had been in contact. Although Emperor Vast Sky was fighting with the 9-star Emperor, he had sent a team to meet up with Yixing. The two sides had already met up, and Emperor Vast Sky brought Yixing and Wei Qingxian into the inner city. Retreat! Emperor Vast Sky ordered. Their goal just now was to attract the attention of the other martial artists. In reality, they hadn't gone too far from the inner city. Now that they were retreating, they quickly retreated into the inner city. The kings from Astral Elephant Palace, Demon Ceiling Valley, and Dark Moon Palace chased to the edge of the inner city but didn't dare to continue. The inner city had a large number of completed level 5 arrays and even incomplete level 6 arrays. Even a first Nirvana quasi-god would be in great trouble if they were caught in them. After the kings retreated into the inner city, Feng Hanqiu and Feng Junyue also retreated. Although the other 3 quasi-gods had the upper hand, they couldn't stop Feng Hanqiu and Feng Junyue. They could only watch as the two retreated into the inner city. You want to help the giant spirit sect? Ha! In your dreams. Watching Feng Hanqiu and Feng Junyue disappear, Xing Qingji laughed loudly. At this point, he thought that the Big Dipper Sword sect wanted to break out of the encirclement to reinforce the Great Spirit sect and beat back the Big Dipper Sword sect's martial practitioners. Big Dipper Sword sect, Main Hall. Yixing and Wei Qingxian were brought here by the Big Dipper Sword sect. Soon, Emperor Vast Heaven, Feng Hanqiu, and Feng Junyue, 2 quasi-gods, arrived. There were also more than 10 peerless emperors. Without exception, when they looked at Yixing, they were both shocked and pleasantly surprised. Yixing cupped his fists and greeted everyone. Senior Hanqiu, Senior Junyue, Sect Master Feng, Elders. Emperor Vast Heaven looked at Yixing and said, Yixing, have you really been accepted as a disciple by a true god elder? Only then did Emperor Vast Heaven notice Wei Qingxian and ask, who is this? Yixing nodded and said, this is my partner, Wei Qingxian. After Wei Qingxian and Emperor Vast Heaven greeted each other, Yixing continued, if I hadn't been accepted as a disciple by a true god elder, why would I have returned to the Starry Crescent Land? Master sent me back to the Starry Crescent Land because he thought I was a disciple of the Big Dipper Sword sect and wanted me to come back to help my old sect. Secondly, it was also a training for me. He wanted me to cultivate in the Starry Crescent Land so that I could return to the Dark Star Continent with my own strength in the future. Although Yixing's explanation had a loophole, which was that he couldn't explain why Wei Qingxian had come to the Starry Crescent Land with Yixing, everyone was concerned about the safety of the Big Dipper Sword sect and didn't think too much about the truth of Yixing's words. Quasi-god Feng Hanqiu was the most anxious about the safety of the Big Dipper Sword sect, so he urgently asked, now, how can we help our sect get out of this predicament? Yixing smiled and said, Master told me to bring some treasures. Senior Hanqiu, with these treasures, even if we can't counterattack Xingxiang Palace or Demon Ceiling Valley, we should have no problem restoring the Big Dipper dynasty. The eyes of Emperor Vast Heaven, Feng Hanqiu, Feng Junyue, and the others all brightened. Feng Hanqiu said, Yixing, you are now a disciple of the Dark Star God Palace and a disciple of a true god expert. You must not call us senior anymore. Just call us senior. What treasures have you brought? Okay, senior brother Hanqiu. Yixing nodded and raised his hands. A sword appeared in each of his hands. The moment the swords appeared, their powerful auras made all the martial artists' eyes widen. The two quasi-gods, Feng Hanqiu and Feng Junhue, looked at the two swords with bright eyes and cried out in surprise, middle-quality divine weapons. Divine weapons were offensive tools among divine weapons. They were divided into low quality, middle quality, high quality, and supreme quality. Divine weapons were noble, and each grade made a huge difference in power and value. The majority of quasi-gods use low-quality divine weapons. Only powerful quasi-gods at the 4 nirvana level or higher could easily obtain middle-quality divine weapons. As for high-quality divine weapons, very few quasi-gods possessed them. They were treasures that only true gods possessed. As for supreme-quality divine weapons, they were treasures that even true gods rarely possessed. The 7 factions of the Starry Crescent continent had existed for tens of thousands of years, and they all possessed divine weapons. However, they were the most ordinary low-quality divine weapons. There wasn't a single middle-quality divine weapon. The value of a middle-quality divine weapon wasn't something that a quasi-god who had just entered the Star Nirvana realm could afford. But now, Yixing had taken out middle-quality divine weapons, and 2 of them at once. How could Feng Hanqiu and Feng Junhue not be shocked? That's right. Middle-quality divine weapons. Yixing nodded and handed the sword in his right hand to Feng Hanqiu. This is the sun-chasing star sword. Its specialty is its speed. It's suitable for senior brother Hanqiu. Then, Yixing handed the sword in his left hand to Feng Junhue. This is the sky-shaking sword. Its specialty is its strength. It's suitable for senior brother Junhue. Feng Hanqiu and Feng Junhue took the swords from Yixing excitedly. Are these really for us? The 2 of them found it hard to believe. They were once core disciples of the Dark Star Temple, so they naturally knew how precious middle-quality divine weapons were. They weren't something that ordinary quasi-gods could possess. Even low-quality divine weapons were extremely precious to first nirvana quasi-gods, let alone middle-quality divine weapons. The Big Dipper sword sect would produce a quasi-god every 1,000 years or so. For tens of thousands of years, there were dozens of quasi-gods. However, only 3 of them brought back divine weapons from the Dark Star Temple. Feng Hanqiu and Feng Junhue didn't bring back any divine weapons from the Dark Star Temple. The divine weapons they used were left behind by the predecessors of the Big Dipper sword sect. Although middle-quality divine weapons were precious, Yixing had many of them. Moreover, sword-type weapons weren't suitable for him. When he became a 9-star king, he could enter the Heavenly Bao continent and obtain all of Luo Tiangong's treasures. He could also enter the Star's secret realm and obtain the inheritance of star supremacy. To Yixing, middle-quality divine weapons weren't too precious. He didn't mind giving them away. Chapter 852. Yixing said, "Of course it's for you too. Middle-grade divine weapons are precious, but they're nothing to my master. You don't have to be so polite." The 2 were overjoyed. Feng Hanqiu said, Good. With this sun-chasing star sword, Star Silver Death has nothing to fear. This old man will be able to compete with him. I no longer need to rely on the dynasty's draconic luck to guard this small place. Feng Junhue nodded. With me, even if Star Elephant Palace, Demon Ceiling Valley, Dark Moon Palace, and Golden Lion sect join forces, our Big Dipper sword sect can fight them. Ha! Senior brother Hanqiu, what are we waiting for? Let's go straight to Star Elephant Palace and the Great Spirit sect's crisis will be resolved. The 2 were in a good mood and laughed excitedly. They looked at each other and bowed to Yixing. Thank you, junior brother Yixing. Thank you, your master. Yixing laughed. The difference in strength between quasi-gods is greater than that between kings. Star Silver Death is a second Nirvana quasi-god and won't be easy to deal with just one middle-grade divine weapon. However, with 2 middle-grade divine weapons and the 2 of you working together, Star Silver Death will be defeated. Feng Hanqiu thought for a moment and nodded. That's right. Now that the Great Spirit Sect is being attacked by Star Silver Death and the others, we couldn't save them even if we wanted to. Now that we have the strength, we should go and save them immediately. Big Dipper City, East City. The void split open, and the 2 quasi-gods, Feng Hanqiu and Feng Junue, walked out. Their quasi-god auras exploded, and their power was earth-shattering. Airwaves rolled in the sky and clouds surged like the sea. The 3 quasi-gods, Xingqingji, Feng Hao, and Xian Yuan, immediately traveled through the void and appeared in front of Feng Hanqiu and Feng Junue. At this time, the 3 of them already knew that 2 4-star kings had rushed into the inner city during the previous battle. However, the 3 of them didn't care. They were just 2 4-star kings. Even if they were stronger than a 7-star king, they wouldn't care. Looking at Feng Hanqiu and Feng Junue, Xingqingji laughed. Old farts, what tricks are you up to? In short, you're dreaming if you want to rescue the Great Spirit Sect. Feng Hao was a few hundred years younger than Xingqingji, so he looked much younger. However, his face was also filled with a sinister smile. Hee hee. After the Giant Spirit Sect is destroyed, it will be your Big Dipper Sword Sect's turn. Feng Hanqiu snorted coldly and said, Xingqingji, your good days are over. Go to hell. As he spoke, Feng Hanqiu formed a sword seal and summoned the sun-chasing star sword. Whoosh! A dazzling sword light appeared out of nowhere. This sword light seemed to be able to split the heavens and earth, revealing a vast divine might that made people not dare to look at it directly. Xingqingji, Feng Hao, and Xian Yuan's expressions changed drastically as they exclaimed, mid-grade divine weapon. Feng Hanqiu said coldly, that's right. It's a middle-grade divine artifact, the heaven-shaking gale sword art. Kill. Whoosh, following Feng Hanqiu's sword seal, the sun-chasing star sword swept out like a gale. Sword light swept out, attacking Xingqingji layer after layer. Xingqingji's expression changed drastically. He had exchanged blows with Feng Hanqiu several times, and their strength was on par. However, Feng Hanqiu, who was using a middle-grade divine artifact, was currently bursting with power that made his heart palpitate. He felt as if he was facing Xing Silver Death. Xingqingji shouted, lend me a hand. As he spoke, Xingqingji also summoned a divine artifact. It was a golden square seal called the Vajra Heaven-Suppressing Seal. The Vajra Heaven-Suppressing Seal bloomed with dazzling golden light. It grew to the size of a mountain and soared into the sky. Bang, 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 bang. The sword light from the sun-chasing star sword struck the Vajra Heaven-Suppressing Seal layer after layer, constantly producing loud noises. In the blink of an eye, countless exchanges had occurred. The dazzling golden light of the Vajra Heaven-Suppressing Seal suddenly dimmed. Xingqingji was sweating profusely. The Vajra Heaven-Suppressing Seal trembled in the sky. It was extremely strenuous to withstand Feng Hanqiu's attacks. At this moment, Feng Hao and Xian Yuan attacked at the same time. Demon Sealing God Destroying Seal. Yin Wind Ghost Sword Technique. The 2 of them shouted at the same time. Feng Hao wore a pair of low-grade divine artifact gloves. In the blink of an eye, he formed hundreds of hand seals. The layers of hand seals were extremely complex. As for Xian Yuan, he summoned a low-grade divine artifact sword. In an instant, a chilly wind blew in the sky. There were faint cries of ghosts and howls of wolves. The Demon Sealing God Destroying Seal and the Yin Wind Ghost Sword Technique, the 2 divine artifacts on the left and right of the Vajra Heaven Suppressing Seal attacked the layers of sword light at the same time. The trembling Vidra heaven-suppressing seal immediately stabilized. Feng Hao and Xian Yuan blocked most of the attack power of the sun-chasing star sword. Xing Qingji's situation immediately improved. He let out a long sigh of relief. Although Feng Hanqiu's strength had greatly increased due to the sun-chasing star sword, he could not gain the upper hand in a head-on fight with three quasi-gods. However, the sun-chasing star sword's specialty was its speed, not its strength. It could not unleash its true power in a head-on fight with the enemy. Feng Hanqiu smiled. The sword technique in his hand changed, and he shouted, "Go!" Swish, the sword light that filled the sky suddenly condensed at one point. The sun-chasing star sword appeared. It only appeared for a moment before it turned into a stream of light and disappeared. The sun-chasing star sword did not disappear. It was just that its speed was so fast that it caused one to be unable to see clearly. The sword light circled in the air. In the blink of an eye, it bypassed the Vidra heaven-suppressing seal, Feng Hao, and Xian Yuan's attacks and stabbed at Xing Qingji. Xing Qingji's hair stood on end. He sensed a terrifying danger and was greatly shocked. "Return!" Xing Qingji shouted. The Vidra heaven-suppressing seal, which was as big as a mountain, flew back to Xing Qingji like a meteor. In the blink of an eye, it returned to Xing Qingji and shrunk to the size of a wash basin, barely blocking the attack of the sun-chasing star sword. The shrunken Vidra heaven-suppressing seal was much weaker. Bang! With a loud explosion, the Vidra heaven-suppressing seal was knocked back by the sword and crashed into Xing Qingji's body. Xing Qingji's chest caved in. He spat out a mouthful of blood and his body shot backward. "Seal!" Feng Hao shouted. The collision between the sun-chasing star sword and the Vidra heaven-suppressing seal stopped. Feng Hao immediately seized the opportunity and slapped out a set of hand seals. Demon Sealing God Destroying Seal. Demon Sealing Seal sealed, God Destroying Seal attacked. Feng Hao used all his strength to perform the Demon Sealing Seal. Seals covered the sun-chasing star sword. Feng Hanqiu performed the sky-sweeping gale sword technique and used all his strength to drive the sun-chasing star sword. The sun-chasing star sword trembled. Even though it was a middle-grade divine weapon, it could not break free for a while. This showed how strong the sealing power of the demon sealing seal was. Xian Yuan was overjoyed. He formed a sword technique and pointed at Feng Hanqiu. He shouted, "Die!" A cold wind blew. The low-grade divine sword in the sky flashed with a bright light. While the sun-chasing star sword was being sealed by the demon sealing seal, it attacked Feng Hanqiu. Hee. At this moment, Feng Junue, who had not made a move, laughed. He suddenly formed a sword technique and shouted, "Heavenly Dragon Mountain Suppressing Sword Technique." Whoosh! A sword light appeared out of nowhere, bringing with it a vigorous aura. This sword light was like a mountain with heavenly dragons dancing in it. It was extremely powerful. It fell from the sky and slashed at the low-grade divine sword that Xian Yuan had used. With a crisp sound, the low-grade divine sword was sent flying into the distance. Xian Yuan's body swayed and he spat out a mouthful of blood. Another middle-grade divine weapon? Xian Yuan screamed in horror. Chapter 853. Feng Hanqiu's strength was close to Xing Qingji, Feng Hao, and Xian Yuan's. However, with a middle-grade divine weapon, his strength had reached a level where even the three of them were at a disadvantage. Now, Feng Junue had also taken out a middle-grade divine weapon. Xing Qingji, Feng Hao, and Xian Yuan were all shocked and terrified. They were shocked because the Big Dipper sword sect did not have any middle-grade divine weapons, and Feng Hanqiu and Feng Junue had never used one before. How did they both have a middle-grade divine weapon all of a sudden? Middle-grade divine weapons were not cabbages. In the starry crescent land, they were supreme treasures, the strongest divine weapons that had never appeared before. Feng Hanqiu and Feng Junhua both had such treasures. It was so strange that Xing Qingji and the other two could not believe it. In a flash, the three of them recalled the news that their subordinates had reported. 2 4-star kings had broken through the blockade and entered the inner city. The Big Dipper sword sect did not have any middle-grade divine weapons. Now that 2 4-star kings had entered the sect, Feng Hanqiu and Feng Junhua each had one. At this moment, Xing Qingji and the other two understood that the 2 middle-grade divine weapons must be related to the 2 4-star kings. Xing Qingji and the other two immediately regretted it. If they had known that 2 4-star kings had entered the sect with middle-grade divine weapons, they would not have fought with Feng Hanqiu and Feng Junhua. They would have killed the 2 4-star kings directly and snatched the 2 middle-grade divine weapons. Under a strong attack, the Big Dipper sword sect's dynasty luck would be exhausted in less than 3 to 5 years, and they would be completely annihilated. It was too late to say anything now. If Feng Hanqiu and Feng Junhua only had one middle-grade divine weapon, they would still dare to fight. However, with 2 divine weapons, their lives would be threatened. How would they dare to fight? Junior brother Hao, junior brother Yuan, retreat. Xing Qingji, who was spurting blood from his own Vajra heaven-suppressing seal, yelled. Then, he turned into a beam of light and fled. His speed was so fast that he could travel at least 600 miles in one breath. Although Xing Qingji reminded them verbally, Feng Hao and Xian Yuan knew that they had to retreat. What they needed was not Xing Qingji's verbal reminder, but Xing Qingji's practical help. Once Xing Qingji fled, they could only face Feng Junhua's heavenly dragon mountain suppressing sword art head-on. The heaven-shaking mighty divine sword sent Xian Yuan's low-ranked divine sword flying. Its momentum was like a rainbow, and it did not diminish in the slightest. In the blink of an eye, it slashed in front of Xian Yuan. Xian Yuan's face was filled with horror as he retreated rapidly. At the same time, he formed a defensive sword seal and activated a dense protective sword aura. In a hurry, how could he defend against the terrifying power of the mighty heaven-shaking sword? Boom! With a loud explosion, Xian Yuan's protective sword aura was completely dispersed. His body shot backwards like a cannonball, and blood sprayed out in a long line. Xian Yuan's body was like a parched earth. Large amounts of cracks appeared on his body. They were all caused by the sword qi. One of the main sword scars was deep and long. Even his divine bones were broken. Large amounts of his internal organs were crushed. However, quasi-gods had immortal bodies. As long as their divine bodies were not completely crushed in an instant, it was not a fatal injury. They only needed to consume their life force to quickly recover. Xian Yuan used the force of this attack to escape. His flesh wriggled, and his damaged body was quickly repaired. In the blink of an eye, he was back to normal. The moment Xian Yuan was injured, the chasing sun star sword also penetrated the seal of the demon sealing seal. At this moment, Feng Hao was also turning to flee. His speed was not inferior to Xing Qingji and Xian Yuan's. However, the chasing sun star sword was faster than Feng Hao. Like a beam of light, it caught up with Feng Hao in the blink of an eye. It pierced through the back of Feng Hao's head and pierced it into pieces. Even though his head was gone, Feng Hao's speed did not decrease. He fled 600 miles in one breath. His flesh wriggled, and his head grew back in the blink of an eye. Quasi-gods were extremely fast, and it was not easy to catch up with them. Feng Hanqiu and Feng Junhua did not chase after Xing Qingji and the other two. Instead, they looked at each other and made a decision. Boom! Feng Junhua wielded the heaven-shaking mighty sword and performed the heavenly dragon mountain suppression sword technique. The mountain-like sword force carried a terrifying attack power and attacked the martial artists of Xingxiang Palace, Demon Sealing Valley, and Darkeen Palace. The speed of a king was much slower than that of a quasi-god. Xing Qingji and the other two escaped, but the kings of the three forces were not that fast. When they saw Xing Qingji and the other two escaping, it was too late for them to escape. The heaven-shaking mighty sword was unstoppable. The anti-teleportation formation was instantly destroyed, and a large number of kings were killed. Feng Hanqiu instantly traveled through the void and appeared at another location outside Big Dipper City. A large number of kings of the three forces were gathered here. Once the chasing sun-star sword was used, it was naturally an easy massacre. Kill. At this moment, Great Emperor Vast Sky also led the martial artists of Big Dipper Sword sect out of the inner city. The martial artists of Xingxiang Palace and the other two forces were completely defeated. In this battle, other than Xing Qingji, Feng Hao, and Xian Yuan, the three quasi-gods, only a small number of kings escaped through the teleportation formation. The rest all died in Big Dipper City. Giant Holy City. Starsilver Death and the others were resting in the outer city to recover their strength. The giant holy sect no longer had a source of imperial dragon luck. They could not replenish it, so there was no need to keep attacking. Suddenly, Starsilver Death and Feng Nongying's communication pearls received a message, and it started to vibrate violently. Obviously, someone had sent an extremely important message using a special communication method. Both of them were surprised. Now, the dynasties of Big Dipper Sword Sect, Giant Holy Sect, and Moon Severing Sect had all been destroyed. Only the three major sects could only rely on their imperial dragon luck to defend their territory in the inner city of the imperial capital. It was only a matter of time before the three major sects were destroyed. What else could be so urgent? Starsilver Death and Feng Nongying took out their communication pearls. Then, their expressions changed at the same time, revealing shock. Feng Nongying looked at Starsilver Death and said, "Brother Yin, you received the message too?" Starsilver Death nodded and said in shock, "The Big Dipper Sword Sect has a middle-grade divine weapon, and Feng Hanqiu and Feng Junwei each have one. How is this possible?" Feng Nongying said in shock, "Yes. Middle-grade divine weapons are so precious. Even in the Dark Star Temple, only senior brothers who are quasi-gods of the fourth nirvana and above have one. Very few junior quasi-gods have one. How could the Big Dipper Sword Sect have a middle-grade divine weapon?" The two looked at each other in disbelief. However, since Xing Qingji and Feng Hao had sent this message, it could not be fake. Starsilver Death immediately stood up and said, "Let's put the attack on the Giant Holy Sect aside for now. Let's go to the Big Dipper Sword Sect and have a look. Middle-grade divine weapon is not something that Feng Hanqiu and Feng Junwei are qualified to have." Humph. The two immediately notified Jin Hongqing and left the Giant Holy City with the kings of Astral Elephant Palace, Demon Ceiling Valley, and Golden Lion Sect. In the Giant Holy City, quasi-god Lu Jinghong sensed that Starsilver Death and the others had left. He was slightly surprised. They had besieged the Giant Holy City and attacked for more than a year. It was strange that they would suddenly leave. Chapter 854. Not long after Starsilver Death left Giant Spirit City, he received another message from Xing Qingji. Starsilver Death was furious when he saw that Feng Hanqiu and Feng Junwei were leading the experts of the Big Dipper Sword Sect to the Astral Dynasty. The Big Dipper Sword Sect's goal was obvious. They wanted to take advantage of the fact that the quasi-gods of the Celestial Elephant Palace were outside to attack the royal capital and destroy the Dragon Luck. The Imperial Dragon Luck was the foundation of the sect. Once the sect was in trouble, the Imperial Dragon Luck could protect them for 100 to 200 years. The Big Dipper Sword Sect wanted to destroy the Celestial Elephant Palace's foundation. How could Starsilver Death not be angry? Starsilver Death immediately sent a message to Xing Yuehong, who was besieging the Moon Severing Sect, asking him to return to his sect and deal with the Big Dipper Sword Sect's invasion. Feng Nongying also sent a message to Feng Xiaoyuan, asking him to bring the Demon Sealing Valley's martial artists to the Astral Elephant Palace as reinforcements. The Big Dipper Sword sect went straight for the capital of the Celestial Elephant Palace. They adopted the method of besieging the way to rescue the Zhao, and resolved the crisis of the Giant Spirit sect and the Moon Severing sect in an instant. After the martial practitioners of Astral Elephant Palace and Demon Sealing Valley retreated, Quasi-God Lu Jinghong of the Giant Spirit sect and Quasi-God Qiu Minjun of the Moon Severing sect also received messages from the Big Dipper Sword sect. When Lu Jinghong and Qiu Minjun found out that Feng Hanqiu and Feng Junyue possessed middle-grade divine weapons, they were both surprised and overjoyed. They finally understood why the Astral Elephant Palace and Demon Sealing Valley retreated. Immediately, the two of them left the sect and headed to Astral Elephant Palace. The Astral Dynasty had existed for even longer than the Baidu Dynasty. Naturally, its draconic luck was abundant. Destroying it was not an easy task, and it could not be done in a short period of time. Therefore, although Star Silver Death was furious, he was not in a hurry. He waited until he met up with Xing Qingji, Xing Yuehong, and the other quasi-gods before returning to the capital of the Celestial Dynasty. At this time, Lu Jinghong and Qiu Minjun had already joined up with the Big Dipper Sword sect's cultivators. Senior brother Han Qiu, junior brother Junyue. Lu Jinghong and Qiu Minjun could see from afar that Feng Hanqiu and Feng Junyue were both controlling a mid-rank godly sword and attacking the array formation in the inner city. Middle-grade divine swords were terrifyingly powerful, allowing Feng Hanqiu and Feng Junyue's attacks to reach the level of second nirvana quasi-gods. Level 5 arrays couldn't stop them at all and were all destroyed. Even some level 6 arrays were on the verge of collapse. Even the Celestial Elephant sect's Wang Dynasty Dragon Luck, although already awakened, did not have the control of a quasi-god. Under the control of the Celestial Elephant sect's master, the 10,000 Elephant Emperor, the Celestial Elephant sect could only parry and not fight back. However, the Royal Dynasty's luck was extremely dense. Even with a 9-star king controlling it, the consumption of luck was several times faster than that of a quasi-god. It would still take a lot of time to completely destroy it. Feng Hanqiu and Feng Junyue stopped attacking. Soon, Lu Jinghong and Qiu Minjun arrived in front of them. Lu Jinghong and Qiu Minjun's gazes landed on the middle-grade divine weapons of Feng Hanqiu and Qiu Minjun. Lu Jinghong's voice shook as he said, "It's really a middle-grade divine weapon. Senior brother Hanqiu, what's going on? How come you have a middle-grade divine weapon?" Lu Jinghong was indeed shocked. He wasn't that much older than Feng Hanqiu. In the past, whenever he saw Feng Hanqiu, he would call him Old Devil Hanqiu. But now, with a middle-grade divine weapon in hand, Lu Jinghong felt a huge pressure and treated Feng Hanqiu seriously. Feng Hanqiu and Feng Junyue were both elated. They were in a good mood. Feng Hanqiu chuckled and said, "This is the great fortune of the Big Dipper Sword sect." Ha! Do you still remember Yi Xing who participated in the competition under the name of the Big Dipper Sword sect when the Dark Star Divine Palace recruited disciples 6 years ago? Lu Jinghong and Qiu Minjun nodded at the same time. Lu Jinghong said, "Of course." He defeated numerous kings with his cultivation base of 9th level astral reaching realm and was the champion of the competition. Senior brother Hanqiu, what does he have to do with this? Feng Hanqiu's joy deepened as he said, "Junior brother Yi Xing is a genius. He was chosen by a true god elder in the Dark Star Godly Palace and was accepted as a disciple. True god experts can travel through different space continents and know about the changes in the Starry Crescent land. Thus, they sent junior brother Yi Xing back to the Starry Crescent land to solve the Big Dipper Sword sex crisis." Lu Jinghong and Qiu Minjun were dumbfounded. Middle-grade divine weapon was already shocking enough, but it actually involved a true god expert? Lu Jinghong and Qiu Minjun had also cultivated in the Dark Star Godly Palace when they were young. From outer disciple to inner disciple, they eventually became core disciple. Only after exhausting their potential did they return to the starry crescent land. Naturally, they knew how high a true god expert was in the Dark Star Godly Palace. Chio Minjun said joyfully, "Such a good thing. Congratulations. You've only been in the Dark Star Godly Palace for a few years, and you've already been accepted as a disciple by a true god elder. Such a thing is extremely rare in the Dark Star Godly Palace. It's the first time for a disciple of the Starry Crescent Land." While Yu Minjun was speaking, Lu Xinghong had already followed Feng Hanqiu and Feng Juanyue's gaze. Not far away, among the kings of the Big Dipper sword sect, Yi Xing was standing side by side with Vast Sky Emperor. Only 6 years had passed. Lu Xinghong and Chio Minjun naturally remembered Yi Xing, the champion of the Dark Star Godly Palace's disciple recruitment competition. Both of their gazes were filled with sighs. Who would have thought that Yi Xing would have such a promising future? Seeing the two quasi-gods land on him, Yi Xing nodded from afar. Feng Junyue touched the mighty sky-shaking sword in his hand, and his eyes were full of fighting spirit. He said, "For the past few years, we've been bullied by the Celestial Palace. Now that we finally have the strength to fight back, we can't just stand here. Senior brother Xinghong, senior sister Minjun, since you're here, let's attack together. Today, we'll vent our anger." Lu Xinghong shouted, "All right." For the past 2 years, Star Silver Death and the others have been attacking the Giant Spirit sect. We've almost lost 10 to 20% of our Dynasty Dragon luck. Today, we'll let the Celestial Palace have a taste of our power. Feng Hanqiu and Feng Junyue continued to take out their middle-grade divine weapons. Lu Xinghong and Chio Minjun also attacked. The 4 quasi-gods attacked the Dynasty Dragon luck of the Celestial Palace fiercely. Terrifying explosions shook the heavens and the earth. Not long after Lu Xinghong and Chio Minjun arrived, Star Silver Death and the others arrived as well. Astral Elephant Palace, Devil's Ceiling Valley, Dark Moon Temple, and Golden Lion Sect, a total of 4 sects experts. Among them, Astral Elephant Palace had 3 quasi-god realm experts, Devil's Ceiling Valley had 3 quasi-god realm experts, Dark Moon Temple had 1 quasi-god realm expert, and Golden Lion Sect had 1 quasi-god realm expert. The number of kings was in the hundreds, and there were dozens of high-level kings who were peerless emperors. 8 quasi-gods, dozens of high-level kings, and hundreds of beginner and mid-level kings gathered together. Needless to say, their aura was strong. The wind and clouds in the sky cleared a path, and the air billowed. It was as if a prehistoric divine beast was moving. From afar, Feng Hanqiu and the others sensed the arrival of Star Silver Death and the others. They stopped attacking, and the two sides soon faced each other in the sky outside the Celestial Palace. Chapter 858. At this time, Yi Xing attacked like a ghost. He activated the Vermilion Bird Star phase and shot out astral arrows. The Frozen King was hit by the astral arrows and instantly shattered into pieces. Although the 7 Star Kings weren't sealed in ice, their speed was slowed down. How could they dodge Yi Xing's attack? Their heads were instantly crushed by the astral arrow. The majority of the kings present had only constructed a low-grade king body. Those who had constructed a mid-grade king body could be counted on one hand. Whether it was low-grade or mid-grade king bodies, the head was a vital point. Once the head was crushed, the king would naturally die. When Yi Xing attacked, he was like a life reaper. Wherever he passed, the kings of the 4 forces would die one after another. Even the 7 Star Kings couldn't resist the joint attack of Yi Xing and Wei Qingxian. Yi Xing attacked more than a dozen times in the blink of an eye. In just a few breaths of time, dozens of kings had died under Yi Xing's hands. None of them had an intact corpse. Although kings didn't have undying bodies, their vitality was still very strong. Usually, in a battle between kings, as long as the disparity in strength wasn't too great, it wouldn't be easy to kill the other party. Killing them in one blow was even more difficult. Between kings, there had to be a gap of 1 realm in strength to have a great chance of killing the other party. And to kill them in one blow, there had to be a gap of 2 or even 3 realms. For Yixing to kill more than a dozen kings in the blink of an eye, that was too shocking. However, if one understood Yixing and Wei Qingxuan's strength, the result wouldn't be so shocking. When the two were still kings, Yixing already had the strength to kill a 7-star king. Wei Qingxian was also invincible under the 7-star king realm. Now, the two of them had become 4-star kings. They had broken through from the initial stage to the mid-stage king realm. Their strength had increased tremendously. Yixing's strength had probably reached the level of being able to kill an 8-star king. As for Wei Qingxian, she was at the peak of 7-star kings. Just think about it, if a 7-star ruler and an 8-star ruler joined forces, how terrifying would their strength be? Wei Qingxuan's attacks had the ability to freeze and control the enemy's movements. Yixing's attacks were extremely fast and powerful. They had terrifying penetrative power and destructive power. When the two of them worked together, one controlled the enemy while the other killed the enemy. Naturally, the effect of killing the enemy was doubled. It was much more terrifying than when a 7-star ruler and an 8-star ruler worked together. Killing the other party's kings was naturally like cutting grass. Although there were many kings in the Starry Crescent land, they were not as common as cabbages. Every time one of them died, it would be a great loss. How could they withstand Yixing's swift harvest? In less than 10 breaths of time, Yixing had already killed more than 10 kings. The number of kings that died in his hands was much more than the total number of kings that died in the hands of the Big Dipper sword sect. In just a few breaths of time, more than 10% of the kings of the 4 major powers had died. This result was out of everyone's expectations, and it was shocking. The Big Dipper sword sect's cultivators were naturally overjoyed. However, the kings of the 4 major powers were incomparably shocked. Even the emperors of the Starry Crescent realm were terrified of Yixing. None of them dared to make a move against Yixing. Since the other party did not take the initiative to attack, Yixing took the initiative to attack. Yixing was in the front, and Wei Qingxian was behind him. Wei Qingxuan's speed was 100 li in a breath. Her sovereign bloodline was activated, and she struck out with her icy palms. Although the attack power was not strong, it had a great effect on the enemy kings. Only 8-star emperors could rely on their strength to ignore the attack of this cold chi. The azure cloud wings opened behind Yixing's back. Yixing's speed was even faster than Wei Qingxuan's, reaching 100 li in a breath. Every time Wei Qingxian attacked with her cold chi, Yixing would be the first to attack. For a time, wherever Yixing went, the enemy kings would retreat as if they had seen a ghost. But even so, there were still many kings who died under Yixing's hands. After all, Yixing's speed was too fast, much faster than 7-star emperors. In addition to Wei Qingxuan's cold chi attacks, ordinary kings would not be able to dodge in time. The deaths of the kings of the 4 major powers boosted the morale of the Big Dipper sword sect's kings. Yixing, die! Suddenly, a loud roar resounded. A king realm expert wielding a supreme-grade profound weapon charged towards Yixing. It was an emperor of the Starry Crescent realm. Although the battle was chaotic and the people from both sides were mixed together, the general area where the kings of both sides were located was still very clear. Yixing killed his way through, so he naturally went deeper into the enemy's territory. The emperor of the Celestial Elephant Palace, the Golden Monkey Emperor, had long been paying attention to Yixing. When he fought with the great emperor of the Big Dipper sword sect, he didn't charge forward. He was in a position where he could fight or retreat. When he saw Yixing going deeper into his territory, he immediately retreated and whipped out his supreme-grade profound weapon, the Golden Dragon Truncheon. How terrifying was the might of an 8-star emperor's attack! The void was compressed by the truncheon, and the trees and plants below were crushed into dust. Even the ground cracked open. If this truncheon landed, it would definitely cause the earth to crack and mountains to crumble. A huge crater would be formed in a radius of 10 li. Wei Qingxuan's frosty palm print covered a distance of more than 10 miles, but the Golden Monkey King's figure was not weakened by the frosty air at all. In half a blink of an eye, he was already in front of Yixing. Moreover, as soon as the Golden Monkey Emperor attacked, another 7-star Emperor attacked Wei Qingxian. With the Golden Monkey Emperor dealing with Yixing, the 7-star Emperor wasn't afraid of Wei Qingxian. It seemed long, but it all happened in an instant. The Golden Monkey Emperor was too fast. Although Yixing wasn't slower than his opponent, he couldn't maintain his top speed forever. There was a time gap between every move. As long as he seized the opportunity, it was normal for the slower one to hit the faster one. Otherwise, with Yixing's speed, which was close to 200 li in a breath, and the Golden Monkey Emperor could only reach 150 li in a breath. Wouldn't that mean that as long as Yixing was moving, the Golden Monkey Emperor would never be able to hit Yixing? Of course not. For example, at this moment, the Golden Monkey Emperor's truncheon came at the same time as Yixing's 2 moves. Yixing couldn't avoid it. Since he couldn't avoid it, he could only face it head-on. The golden flame bow immediately appeared in Yixing's hand. With a burst of violent power, the shadow of the golden flame bow shot out with an explosive sound. The Golden Monkey Emperor's power was too terrifying. The shadow of the golden flame bow was destroyed in one strike. The golden dragon truncheon and the golden flame bow collided violently. The golden dragon truncheon focused on power, while the golden flame bow focused on shooting. In a head-on collision, the golden flame bow was naturally at a disadvantage. Moreover, Yixing's power was much weaker than the Golden Monkey Emperor's. As the golden flame bow bent and shot, Yixing was instantly sent flying like a cannonball. Chapter 859. Seeing Yixing sent flying by the Golden Monkey King's mace, the kings from the Astral Elephant Palace and the rest of the 4 powers were invigorated. On the other hand, the kings from the Big Dipper Sword sect were shocked. The vast Sky Emperor's eyes widened as his aura erupted once more. The mace's power surged as he tried to push back all his opponents to save Yixing. However, their priority was to kill Yixing. Now that the Golden Monkey King had the chance, the other kings wouldn't allow the vast Sky Emperor to save Yixing. Whether it was the Astral Elephant Palace or the kings from the other 3 powers, they all unleashed their full strength to resist the mace's mace. Several 8-star sovereigns vomited blood, and the 9-star Emperor's face paled. However, they had the advantage in numbers and managed to suppress the mace's mace. As for the other 2 emperors, one was held back by the Myriad Phenomenon Emperor, while the other was in a similar situation as the vast Sky Emperor. They used their absolute advantage in numbers to resist the mace's mace, preventing the vast Sky Emperor from saving Yixing. The 8-star sovereigns from the Big Dipper Sword sect naturally faced the same situation. Although Yixing had killed quite a few kings, most of them were low-level and mid-level kings. Only a few 7-star sovereigns had died, and the other side's high-level kings hadn't lost much strength. In terms of overall strength, the 4 powers still had the upper hand. The 7-star sovereign charging at Wei Qingxian was at the peak of the 7th rank, and he was extremely powerful. Wei Qingxian wouldn't be able to win quickly, and she wouldn't be able to save Yixing, ha 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 ha. The Golden Monkey Emperor laughed heartily and was in high spirits. After sending Yixing flying with a kick, his body swayed slightly before stabilizing. He shouted, "Die!" As he spoke, the golden dragon mace shone with a dazzling golden light. The golden dragon mace rushed forward and chased after Yixing. Once again, the golden dragon mace in his hand smashed down. "Hang in there, Yixing." The hearts of the kings of the Big Dipper Sword sect tightened. The Big Dipper sword sex crisis had been resolved by Yi Xing. How could they be willing to see Yi Xing be killed by the Golden Monkey King? Wei Qingxian, on the other hand, was calm. She knew that Yi Xing had a supreme-grade divine body. Even if he was hit by the Golden Monkey Emperor, his life would not be in danger. Moreover, Yi Xing had not used his true power yet. Just as the golden dragon mace was about to strike Yi Xing's body with its scintillating golden light, a massive palace suddenly appeared out of thin air before crashing down from the sky like a massive mountain. It was a replica of the divine artifact Stellar Hall. The Star Hall was no ordinary god artifact. Although Yi Xing was unable to use its true power, he could control it as he pleased as the master of the Star Hall. How heavy was the Star Hall? It was much heavier than the Sky Dragon Truncheon. When it came down, the Golden Dragon Truncheon lost all its golden light and smashed the Golden Monkey King to the ground. Even an 8-star emperor would find it extremely difficult to wield a divine weapon. Yi Xing was only a 4-star emperor. How could the Golden Monkey King have expected that Yi Xing would suddenly summon a divine weapon? Naturally, he was caught in the middle and struck to the ground by the Starry Palace in the blink of an eye. Boom! With a loud explosion, the ground within a radius of tens of li caved in. Mountains crumbled. The Star Hall was hundreds of meters tall and stood in the middle of the collapsed ground like a mountain. God artifact. Heavens, that's a huge god artifact. How is this possible? How can a 4-star king use a god artifact? Whether it was the kings of the Big Dipper sword sect or the kings of the other 4 factions, they were all shocked by this sudden change. Looking at the Star Hall that was hundreds of meters tall, their eyes were filled with disbelief. Although the quasi-gods in the distance were engaged in an intense battle, exchanging dozens of blows in the blink of an eye, they were also paying attention to the situation here. Yi Xing taking out a god artifact also shocked these quasi-gods. Especially Xing Qingji, whose expression changed when he saw the Star Hole. As the person who had plotted against Emperor Xing Han and wanted to steal his god artifact, Xing Qingji naturally recognized the Star Hole. 700 years ago, Emperor Xing Han was plotted against by Xing Qingji and the then palace lord of Xingxiang. He was poisoned and undoubtedly died. However, Emperor Xing Han used the Great Space-Breaching Talisman to escape from the Starry Crescent land and disappeared. 700 years later, Xing Qingji saw the Star Hall again, but it was actually Yi Xing who had taken it out. How could he not be shocked? While Xing Qingji was distracted, Feng Hanqiu seized the opportunity and swung the Chasing Sun sword in the sky, bypassing Feng Hao and Xian Yuan's blockade and instantly attacked. In an instant, the sweeping sword light shrouded Xing Qingji's entire body. The sky-sweeping gale sword technique was all about the word sweep. Like the autumn wind sweeping away fallen leaves, it swept past and was filled with rotating power. The sword light shrouded Xing Qingji and also spun at an extremely fast speed, filled with terrifying strangulation power. Xing Qingji's divine body was instantly cut into pieces. In a battle between quasi-gods, dozens of blows could be exchanged in the blink of an eye. A moment of distraction, even if it was only for a moment, was a fatal flaw. Although the divine body was immortal, Xing Qingji's divine body was far from being reborn from a single drop of blood. If his body was cut into pieces, he would die. Senior brother Qingji. Feng Hao and Xian Yuan turned pale with fright and exclaimed at the same time. In an instant, Feng Hao formed hundreds of hand seals and slapped at Xing Qingji. It was the demon sealing seal. Xian Yuan wielded his low-tier divine sword and attacked Feng Hanqiu. In the blink of an eye, the demon sealing seal hit Xing Qingji's Chasing Sun star sword. Although it was not completely sealed, the speed of strangulation was greatly reduced. Xing Qingji let out a painful howl. Blood sprayed out like a long river as he rushed out from the rotating sword light. His hands and feet had already lost half of his body. More than half of his head had also been cut into pieces by the chasing sun-star sword. Only a small part of his head and half of his chest remained. If Feng Hao had not saved him in time and used the demon sealing seal to seal the chasing sun-star sword, Xing Qingji's entire body would have been cut into pieces and he would have died without a doubt. In the distance, Feng Hanqiu's figure flickered. Like a phantom, he shuttled through the void and avoided the attack of Xian Yuan's Yin Wind Ghost Sword technique. Seeing that Xing Qingji was not dead, he sighed. It was too difficult to kill a quasi-god. Feng Hanqiu felt that it was a pity that he did not succeed when he finally had the chance. A quasi-god was the strongest power of a force. Killing one would be a heavy loss for any force. Feng Hanqiu knew that if he could not kill Xing Qingji just now, it would be almost impossible to kill him again. Xing Qingji's flesh and blood wriggled and his divine body reconstructed. In the blink of an eye, he recovered to his original state. However, his face was pale. His body had suffered such heavy injuries. Recovering to his normal state consumed too much of his vitality. Xing Qingji's vitality was greatly damaged. After becoming a quasi-god, this was the first time Xing Qingji had faced a life-and-death crisis. He looked at Feng Hanqiu, his eyes full of anger and malice. At the same time, Xing Qingji's desire to kill Yi Xing grew stronger and stronger. He knew that the Starry Hall was not an ordinary divine weapon. It was also not a mid-tier divine weapon. It was a high-tier divine weapon. Chapter 860. Yi Xing's retreating body suddenly stopped. He stood in the air with a smile on his face. The Stellar Hall was indeed a high-grade divine artifact. Without activating its power, it was able to suppress the Golden Monkey Emperor with just its strength. However, it was impossible to kill an 8-star emperor with just the suppression of the Stellar Hole. Although the Golden Monkey Emperor was instantly struck down from the sky by the Stellar Hall, he did not suffer any serious injuries. Boom! With a loud explosion, the mountain-like Stellar Hall suddenly flew into the air. The Golden Monkey Emperor was in the air and had nowhere to borrow strength from. When he was struck by the Starry Hall, he was naturally suppressed in an instant. However, when he landed on the ground, he unleashed his full strength and blasted the Starry Hall away. Without activating the Stellar Hall's power, it was just a hard weapon. To put it bluntly, it was just a pile of scrap metal. It was only because it was made of high-grade divine metal that it was heavy. However, the power of one blow was not inferior to that of a supreme-grade profound weapon. The Golden Monkey Emperor roared angrily after sending the Stellar Hall flying. His aura surged and his strength exploded to the limit. He even used more than 100% of his terrifying strength. You can't activate such a divine artifact. It's a waste for it to be in your hands. Die, Yi Xing. Even a divine artifact can't save you, the Golden Monkey Emperor shouted. The Golden Monkey Emperor shouted. He had personally faced the attack of the Starry Hall and naturally knew that Yi Xing had not activated the power of this divine weapon. Although the Golden Monkey Emperor did not know the grade of the Star Palace, judging from its aura and shape, he knew that it was definitely not a low-grade divine artifact. If such a powerful divine artifact was activated, how could he, the Golden Monkey Emperor, who was only at the 8th layer of the Star Sea realm, withstand it? He would probably be crushed into meat paste in an instant, dying without a doubt. The Golden Monkey Emperor naturally did not believe that Yi Xing was deliberately not activating the divine artifact's power. He knew that Yi Xing could not activate the divine artifact's power, so he was full of confidence. The Golden Monkey Emperor had been struck by the Stellar Hall because it had appeared out of nowhere and descended from the sky. It was out of his expectations. Having learned his lesson, the Golden Monkey Emperor was prepared and would not be easily struck by the Stellar Hall. As soon as he finished speaking, the Golden Monkey Emperor released a golden light and suddenly flashed forward. Whoosh 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 whoosh. Although the Golden Monkey Emperor was rushing towards Yi Xing, he was not moving in a straight line. Instead, he was constantly changing his position. Clearly, he was using some kind of footwork. As a result, Yixing was unable to predict where the Golden Monkey Emperor would appear next. It was impossible to hit him with the stellar hole. If he could activate the power of the starry hall, the divine fire in the hall would attack and turn a large area into a sea of fire. No matter how the Golden Monkey King changed his position, he would be burned to ashes. Unfortunately, Yixing could not destroy the power of the stellar hall, so he could only use other methods. In the face of the Golden Monkey King, Yixing showed no fear. Instead, the corners of his mouth curled up into a cold smile. Yixing instantly retreated like a stream of light. At the same time, a beam of starlight soared into the sky, transforming into a massive black hole vortex. Yixing had utilized the black hole astrology. In an instant, the Golden Monkey Emperor was plunged into a world of darkness. His supreme metal element astrology could not tear apart the darkness enveloped by the black hole astrology. He could only barely see a few hundred meters around him. As for Yixing, he moved through the world of darkness without making a sound. The Golden Monkey Emperor could not detect him and instantly lost track of Yixing. The Golden Monkey Emperor was shocked. He immediately activated his astral energy, forming a dazzling golden shield to protect his body. Whoosh! Just then, another beam of starlight soared into the sky. Yixing had used the Sagittarius astrology again. In the starry crescent continent, it was no secret that he possessed the supreme astrology. Yixing could use it without worry. The black hole astrology and the Sagittarius astrology stood side by side in the sky. Whether it was the distant quasi-gods or the nearby kings, they could all feel the terrifying power contained in these two great astrologues. The golden flame bow appeared in Yixing's hands. Yixing drew the bowstring and used the dark wind fire arrow technique. A black flame arrow quickly formed. The Golden Monkey Emperor's astral energy protected his body and the golden dragon truncheon in front of his chest. He was on high alert as he chased after Yixing. The black flame arrow was now fully formed. Yixing immediately released the bowstring. Whoosh! The black flame arrow was extremely compatible with the world of darkness. It moved through the world of darkness at high speed without making a sound. It was only when it was within a few hundred meters of the Golden Monkey Emperor that he sensed a weak vibration. Although this vibration was weak, it contained an extremely sharp aura and was filled with terrifying penetrative power. The Golden Monkey Emperor was shocked. He immediately reacted and realized that it was an arrow. However, the black flame arrow covered the distance of several hundred meters in the blink of an eye. If the Golden Monkey Emperor had seen Yixing shoot the arrow and had been prepared, he might have had a chance of avoiding it. But now, there was no way to avoid it. Moreover, the space around the Golden Monkey Emperor had solidified. It was like an invisible solid that sealed his body and made it difficult for him to move. Even an 8-star emperor could not move. It was clear that the power of the solidified space was very strong. This meant that Yixing's archery skills had reached an extremely high level. The Golden Monkey Emperor sensed the arrow coming and had just understood. He did not even have time to look in the direction of the arrow before his head was hit by the black flame arrow. Bang! The black flame arrow pierced through the Golden Monkey Emperor's head. With a loud explosion, the Golden Monkey Emperor's head exploded, turning into a bloody mist that scattered in all directions. The Golden Monkey Emperor did not even have time to scream before he died. His headless corpse fell from the sky and crashed to the ground. Yixing stretched out his hand and made a grabbing motion. Dense astral energy surged out and transformed into a huge hand, grabbing the golden dragon truncheon and storage ring. From the moment Yixing used the black hole astrology and Sagittarius astrology to the moment the Golden Monkey Emperor's head exploded by the arrow, everything happened in the blink of an eye. The martial artists present were still shocked by Yi Xing's use of the black hole astrology and Sagittarius astrology. A moment of carelessness and the Golden Monkey Emperor lost his head and died. This was an 8-star emperor. At this point in the battle, there were many 8-star emperors who had been injured. However, the Golden Monkey Emperor was the first to die. Yi Xing grabbed the Golden Monkey truncheon and his storage ring and put them away without checking them. Then, he drew the golden flame bow. The black flame arrow quickly took shape and locked onto an 8-star emperor in the distance. He had even used the black hole astrology and Sagittarius astrology. He had already used his trump card. Naturally, he wanted to take the opportunity to kill. The 8-star emperor who was locked onto by the black flame arrow instantly fell into a world of darkness. He was horrified. Whoosh! The black flame arrow left the bowstring instantly. While the 8-star emperor was still in shock, the arrow hit his head. Just like the Golden Monkey Emperor, his head exploded and he died instantly. Chapter 861. The power of the black hole astral form increased as the cultivator's cultivation base increased. The current black hole astral form formed a world of darkness that could cover hundreds of miles. Therefore, even if Yi Xing was hundreds of miles away, he could still be enveloped by the black hole astral form. At this moment, the battle between the kings of both sides only covered a radius of hundreds of miles. This meant that even if Yi Xing stood still, he could still use the black hole astral form to trap any target in the world of darkness. As for the arrows that Yi Xing shot out, they were shot from the supreme grade profound bow, the golden flame bow, which had a much longer range than the crimson flame bow. The arrow's power was maintained at a distance of more than 300 miles. Therefore, as long as one was trapped in the world of darkness, they would immediately face Yi Xing's arrows and be in danger of dying. In this area, Yi Xing could target any of the martial emperors. Yi Xing's targets were the 8-star sovereigns of the 4 major forces. The 9-star great emperors were much stronger than Yi Xing. The black hole astral form might not be able to trap them in the world of darkness and the arrows that were shot out might not be able to kill them. However, Yi Xing was very confident that he could kill the 8-star sovereigns in one shot. Although the 9-star great emperors were the pinnacle of the kings of both sides, the 8-star sovereigns were also very important. The 9-star great emperors of the other side were originally no match for the vast heaven great emperors. It was precisely because of the dozen or so 8-star sovereigns that they were able to suppress the vast heaven great emperors. As long as Yi Xing killed these 8-star sovereigns, the 9-star great emperors of the other side would soon be defeated and the Big Dipper sword sect would naturally emerge victorious in this battle between the kings. In the blink of an eye, a black flame arrow was formed and shot out explosively. Immediately, an 8-star sovereign lost his life. The arrow that Yi Xing shot out was extremely fast and had an extremely strong binding force. It could also change direction at will. It was impossible to block or evade, and its lethality was heaven-defying. Once the arrow was shot out, an 8-star sovereign would definitely die. In just a few breaths' time, several 8-star sovereigns had died under Yi Xing's arrows. The pressure on the 3 great emperors of the Big Dipper sword sect was greatly reduced, and they began to counterattack with all their might. On the other hand, the kings of the 4 forces were shocked, especially the 8-star sovereigns. They were terrified that Yi Xing's next arrow would be shot at them. A quasi-god ancestor. Many kings of the 4 major forces of the Big Dipper sect cried out for help. In the current situation, the Big Dipper sword sect already had the absolute advantage. The 3 great emperors with divine weapons were already extremely terrifying. Now, Yi Xing was harvesting the lives of the 8-star sovereigns as if he was cutting grass. If he killed all the 8-star sovereigns, the great emperors of the other side would not be able to resist at all and their lives would be in danger. Without the help of the quasi-gods, they would definitely suffer heavy casualties. In fact, there was no need to wait for the kings to cry out. The quasi-gods in the distance were constantly watching the battle between the kings. However, Feng Nongying and Xing Yuehong were suppressed by Qiu Minjun and could not even take care of themselves. Feng Xiaoyuan and Jin Hongqing were also in the same situation. Under Lu Jinghong's attack, even their souls were injured. As for Xing Qingji, Feng Hao, and Xian Yuan, two of them were using all their strength to hold back Feng Hanqiu while the other could go and rescue him. However, Xing Qingji's vitality was greatly injured and could not use half of his strength. Feng Hao and Xian Yuan were also not in good condition and could not leave for a while. Only Starsilver Death, who was thousands of miles away, had an overwhelming advantage against Feng Junyue. However, Starsilver Death's plan was to kill Feng Junyue in one go or snatch the middle-grade divine weapon from Feng Junyue's hands. Feng Junyue was already at a disadvantage. Now, he could only parry and could not fight back. He was fully focused on defense. Therefore, there was a change in the battle between the kings. Starsilver Death did not care at first and planned to snatch the middle-grade divine weapon from Feng Junyue's hands first. Starsilver Death did not know that Yi Xing was using the two supreme celestial forms to kill the 8-star sovereigns. It was as easy as killing dogs. Within a few breaths, he had killed several of them. No matter how much Starsilver Death wanted to snatch the middle-grade divine weapon from Feng Junyue, he had to give up for now. If he allowed Yi Xing to continue killing, all the 8-star sovereigns of the four forces would be killed. Moreover, Yi Xing had used a divine weapon just now. Starsilver Death immediately thought of Yi Xing, Tiger Roaring 3 slashes. Starsilver Death yelled and performed one of the killing moves of the Heavenly Tiger Roaring Saber technique. In an instant, the Heavenly Tiger roared and 3 saber auras slashed down at the same time. Bang! 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 3 explosions sounded at the same time. Feng Junyue spat out blood and was blasted back dozens of miles. Starsilver Death did not chase after him. Instead, he looked at the battlefield of the kings thousands of miles away. He snorted and waved his hand, tearing the space in front of him. Tearing the space to teleport was a skill of a quasi-god. Starsilver Death tore the space and entered the dimensional void in a flash. In the blink of an eye, the space in the sky above the battlefield of the kings was torn apart. Starsilver Death walked out. The aura of a second Nirvana quasi-god suddenly spread out. An invisible force pressed down. Within hundreds of miles, all the kings felt a huge pressure and fell from the sky. Although the aura of a quasi-god was also a kind of aura, it was much stronger than that of a king. The power could be condensed into something tangible. Once a quasi-god unleashed his aura, the space around him would become a forbidden zone. Apart from other quasi-gods, no one could fly. Starsilver Death's eyes were as sharp as knives. He immediately locked onto Yi Xing and sneered. Whoosh! A flash of saber light appeared. Starsilver Death instantly took out a low-grade divine saber and performed the Heavenly Tiger Roaring Saber technique. He slashed at Yi Xing. Before the astral saber arrived, Yi Xing could already feel a bone-piercing sharpness from dozens of miles away. The attack of a second Nirvana quasi-god was too frightening. If this saber really chopped down, even without the astral saber touching Yi Xing's body, just the sharp aura of nothingness would be enough to split Yi Xing in half. Clang! The space suddenly cracked open. A pitch-black circle came out and collided with the saber light in the sky. Sparks flew and a deafening explosion sounded. Starsilver Death frowned. The saber light rolled back in anger. The pitch-black circle retreated, and Lu Jinghong walked out of the rift in space. He raised his hand and grabbed it. It was the mediocre-grade divine artifact that Yi Xing had given him, the Obsidian Soul Annihilating Circle. Not only was the Obsidian Soul Extinguishing Ring powerful, but it was also extremely destructive to the soul. Feng Xiaoyuan and Jin Hongqing's souls had suffered heavy injuries from the battle with Lu Jinghong. They were dispirited and listless. If Lu Jinghong wanted to withdraw, the two of them could not stop him. After Starsilver Death forced Feng Junyue to retreat, he traveled through space and attacked Yixing. Lu Jinghong had been prepared. He also forced Feng Xiaoyuan and Jin Hongqing to retreat and blocked Starsilver Death's attack. With the middle-grade divine weapon Obsidian Soul-Destroying Ring, Lu Jinghong was fully capable of fighting Starsilver Death. Lu Jinghong, you're courting death. Starsilver Death roared. His aura exploded like a furious tiger. Lu Jinghong sneered. He looked at Starsilver Death fearlessly. Just then, the space cracked. Feng Junyue also traveled through space. Chapter 864. Within 3 days, Astral Elephant Palace, Demon Ceiling Valley, Darkeen Palace, and Golden Lion Sect delivered the compensation to the Big Dipper Sword Sect, Giant Spirit Sect, and Moon Severing Sect. Although they were unwilling, they could only compensate and seek temporary peace. Only then would they have time to scheme against Yixing. After the Big Dipper Sword Sect reclaimed their territory and rebuilt their dynasty, gathering draconic luck, they were busy. The quasi-gods of the Big Dipper Sword Sect presided over the sect, while the kings traveled around the territory. However, Yixing was not among these kings. After returning to the Big Dipper Sword Sect, Yixing entered secluded cultivation and did not take a single step out of the Big Dipper Sword Sect. As a result, the plan to assassinate Yixing while he was away would not work. With Yixing and the Big Dipper Sword Sect, even if Starsilver Death gathered all the quasi-gods on his side, they would not be able to break in. Starsilver Death was very vexed by this. He naturally knew that Yixing had great potential. If Yixing was given enough time to grow, he would become a huge threat in the future. As long as the kings of the Big Dipper Sword Sect left the capital, they were confident that they could ambush and kill any one of them. However, if this king was not Yixing, there was no need to ambush him. This was because once they stirred up trouble, another war would erupt. Starting another war over an insignificant person was clearly unwise. Starsilver Death gathered the quasi-gods to discuss countermeasures. In this regard, the quasi-gods were helpless. Yixing was in the Big Dipper Sword Sect, and they could not force their way in. What could they do? Jin Hongqing had been silent all this time. With 8 quasi-gods together, he rarely spoke. However, at this time, his eyes suddenly lit up as he thought of an idea. Starsilver Death, who had been observing the situation, said, "Jin Hongqing, do you have a plan?" Jin Hongqing nodded and said, "Yixing is in the Big Dipper Sword Sect. There's nothing we can do. The only way to kill him is to lure Yixing out of the Big Dipper Sword Sect." Currently, Jin Hongqing was in the same boat as Astral Elephant Palace. If Astral Elephant Palace won, the Golden Lion Sect would be able to maintain its status as a subordinate force, and he would be able to survive. However, if the Big Dipper Sword Sect won, both his life and the Golden Lion Sect would be doomed. Therefore, even though Jin Hongqing regretted boarding this ship, but as a grasshopper on a string, he could only contribute to Astral Elephant Palace. Starsilver Death nodded and said, "But how can we lure Yixing out of the Big Dipper Sword Sect?" Jin Hongqing said, "Yixing is now a 4-star king. He is cultivating in the Big Dipper Sword Sect because he wants to make a breakthrough in his cultivation. When he reaches a certain level and has the battle prowess of a quasi-god, he will come to deal with us. However, the cultivation of the king realm is not easy. Even if he is extremely talented, it will still take a long time for him to make a breakthrough. It will probably take 20 or 30 years for him to have the battle prowess of a quasi-god. If we release the news that some place has a treasure that can help a king to make a breakthrough in his cultivation, I think Yixing will definitely be tempted. Perhaps he will be able to make a breakthrough in his cultivation." Xing Qingji had already recovered his vitality by now. His expression was normal as he said, "This is indeed a method, but it may not work." Putting aside how rare a treasure that can help a king to make a breakthrough in his cultivation is, others may not believe it. Even if they believe it, the Big Dipper sword sect will probably treat Yi Xing like a treasure and not let Yi Xing take the risk himself. Feng Hanqiu and Feng Junhua will probably personally make a trip for Yi Xing to look for the treasure. Lies can be easily exposed. All the quasi-gods nodded in agreement. It was indeed not easy to trick Yi Xing out of the Big Dipper sword sect. Starsilver Death shook his head slightly. He had considered Jin Hongqing's method before, but just as Xing Qingji said, it was very difficult to work and had been rejected by him long ago. Jin Hongqing said, "What if this is not a lie? You all know about the Star-Catcher Cloud Fruit, right?" Starsilver Death's eyes lit up as he said, "The Star-Catcher Cloud Fruit is a supreme saint fruit that can help a king to improve his cultivation. It can help a king to advance a king by 1 realm, a king by 2 realms, and a king by 3 realms." Jin Hongqing, do you know anything about the Star-Catcher Cloud Fruit? Jin Hongqing nodded and said, "That's right. When I was a 9-star king, I ate a Star-Catcher Cloud Fruit. Although it did not directly improve my cultivation, the fact that I could become a quasi-god is definitely related to that Star-Catcher Cloud Fruit." Jin Hongqing was different from the other quasi-gods present. They all became quasi-gods in the Dark Star Temple and then returned to the Starry Crescent Land. Jin Hongqing, on the other hand, was only a 9-star Great Emperor when he returned from the Dark Star Temple. It was only after he returned to the Starry Crescent Land that he became a quasi-god. Starsilver Death said happily, "Tell us, where is the Star-Catcher Cloud Fruit?" Jin Hongqing said, "In an extraterritorial starland, there is a Star-Catcher Cloud Fruit tree. The Star-Catcher Cloud Fruit is a king saint fruit that ripens once every 1,000 years. That extraterritorial starland also connects to the Starry Crescent Land every 1,000 years. When the Star-Catcher Cloud Fruit ripens, it happens to be the same time that the extraterritorial starland connects to the Starry Crescent Land. 1,000 years ago, I entered that place by chance and obtained a Star-Catcher Cloud Fruit." Jin Hongqing smiled and said, "That extraterritorial starland is very strange. Quasi-gods can't enter it, and there is a group of natives living there. They can't cultivate astral qi and can only cultivate their physical bodies. They are like ferocious beasts in human form and are extremely powerful. The Star-Catcher Cloud Fruit tree is their sacred tree, but it has no effect on their cultivation. 1,000 years ago, I entered that place and stole a Star-Catcher Cloud Fruit." When Jin Hongqing mentioned that quasi-gods couldn't enter that extraterritorial starland, Starsilver Death's eyes lit up. Since quasi-gods couldn't enter, Feng Hanqiu and Feng Junhua couldn't help Yi Xing enter to search for treasures. Only kings could go. With the attraction of the Star-Catcher Cloud Fruit, Yi Xing would definitely go in person. In this way, they would have a chance to kill Yi Xing. Starsilver Death said, "In the Starry Crescent Land, Feng Hanqiu and Feng Junhua will definitely protect Yi Xing, so we won't have a chance to kill him. If we want to kill Yi Xing, the chance is in that extraterritorial starland. Let the 9-star Great Emperor enter with a divine weapon. The first purpose is to kill Yi Xing and rob Yi Xing of his treasures. The second purpose is to kill the natives and rob the Star-Catcher Cloud Fruit." Jin Hongqing nodded and said, "If we can kill Yi Xing in the extraterritorial starland and get his treasures, everything will be great." Xing Qingji asked, "How do you know that quasi-gods can't enter? Also, as a 9-star Great Emperor, why did you only steal 1 Star-Catcher Cloud Fruit and not all of the Star-Catcher Cloud Fruit?" Jin Hongqing said, "Brother Qingji, you don't know. 1,000 years ago, I discovered that extraterritorial starland with the late quasi-god Jin Yen of my sect. However, when I entered, Jin Yen was blocked by the power of rules and couldn't enter. Also, Brother Qingji, don't underestimate those natives. Even a divine weapon can't hurt them. Without a divine weapon, you are no match for them." Chapter 865. The Big Dipper dynasty was re-established, and the dynasty's draconic luck was condensed once more. Within the Big Dipper sword sect, Yi Xing and Wei Qingxian were cultivating in seclusion. Their cultivations were also advancing at a rapid pace. Both of them had obtained a lot of corpse jades. Although their astral energies were strong, and even the corpse jades of the 7-star Death Spirit King couldn't help them break through, it still sped up their cultivation speed. Ever since the Astral Elephant Palace paid the compensation, the Starry Crescent land regained its former peace. On the surface, the 7 great sects were living in harmony. Time passed slowly, and a year later, Wei Qingxian and Yi Xing's cultivations broke through to the 5th level of the Astral Sea Realm, becoming 5-star kings. Both of them were people with great comprehension abilities, and their cultivation had also improved a lot. Their strength had increased by a large margin. After the two broke through, they continued to cultivate in seclusion. If they wanted to fight against quasi-gods, they would have to become high-step kings at the very least. The corpse jades of the 7-star Death Spirit King played a huge role in breaking through to 5-star kings so quickly. However, the corpse jades of the two had lost their effect from the 5th level of the Astral Sea Realm to the 6th level, and from the 6th level to the 7th level. Especially from the 6th level to the 7th level of the Astral Sea Realm, that was the difference between a mid-step king and a high-step king. Even though the two of them were rich in resources, they estimated that it would take at least 8 to 10 years to become a 7-star king in the Starry Crescent land. 10 years for Yi Xing, 8 for Wei Qingxian. Another half a year passed, and a piece of news came from the Astral Elephant Palace. The Astral Elephant Palace was preparing to send high-step kings to an outer realm star continent to search for the star-catcher cloud fruit. The 7 great sects each had their own intelligence network, and each sect had planted spies. If something big happened, it would spread quickly. When the Big Dipper sword sect received this news, they immediately took it seriously. The star-catcher cloud fruit was no ordinary fruit. It was a supreme-grade sacred medicine that could raise the cultivation of a king. It was even a great task for a 9-star great emperor to break through to the quasi-god realm. As the Big Dipper sword sect investigated and verified the news, they found out that the source of the news was Jin Hongqing of the Golden Lion sect. Time passed day after day, and the Starry Crescent land was connected to the Starry Crescent land was closer and closer. Feng Hanqiu decided that he would tell Yi the news and let him decide whether he wanted to search for the star-catcher cloud fruit or not. Feng's Feng was the Dipper sword sect, and he was surprised by Yi. Feng Hanqiu S, and Feng was Dipper sword sect. Yi Feng Dipper. Him Feng Dipper sword sect. Feng Dipper Marshal Dipper Feng Dip sect, Feng S Dipper Dipper Senior Marshal Senior Feng Dipper Feng Dipper T Dipper Divine. The star-catcher cloud fruit was an extremely rare saint fruit. Although Yi Xing was knowledgeable, he had never heard of it before. He shook his head. Feng Hanqiu explained, "This is a supreme-grade holy fruit that can raise a king's cultivation. It can raise a high-level king's cultivation by 1 layer, a mid-level king's cultivation by 2 layers, and a low-level king's cultivation by 3 layers. It can even help a 9-star great emperor break through to the quasi-god realm." Yi Xing's heart thumped. As expected of a high-step saint fruit. It's a good treasure indeed. Where can I find such a treasure? He was currently distressed about breaking through to 7-star great emperor. It would take a long time, but if he had the star-catcher cloud fruit, he could easily become a 7-star great emperor. A high-step king could barely wield a divine weapon, but a 7-star great emperor could only wield a divine weapon. Only a 9-star great emperor could wield a divine weapon freely. If Yi Xing became a 7-star great emperor, he wouldn't be inferior to a 9-star great emperor in any aspect. He could wield a divine weapon and fight against a quasi-god realm expert. Yixing estimated that he would need at least 10 years to become a 7-star Great Emperor if he cultivated step by step in the Big Dipper sword sect. This was without any accidents. If he encountered a bottleneck in his cultivation, it would take even longer. Although 10 or 20 years was a short time for other kings, Yixing's goal wasn't just to be a king or quasi-god realm expert. He wanted to stand at the peak of the martial path and become a legendary sovereign. Naturally, his requirements were higher. He shouldn't stay in the king realm for too long. Therefore, Yixing was naturally tempted by the star-catcher cloud fruit. If he could obtain one, Yixing would be able to make continuous breakthroughs in his cultivation and become a high-step king. Feng Hanqiu said, "The star-catcher cloud fruit is a rare treasure that can only be found by chance. It only existed in the Starry Crescent land once, but it has long gone extinct. In the past tens of thousands of years, every time a star-catcher cloud fruit appeared, it basically came from the extraterritorial star continent." Yixing was slightly surprised. Extraterritorial star continent. Feng Hanqiu nodded. The extraterritorial star continent is a small continent that floats between the Starry Crescent land. It's not as vast as the Starry Crescent land, but it's not small either. Every Starry Crescent land has a large number of extraterritorial star continents. However, the two extraterritorial star continents are not in the same space. Unless it's a specific time, they can't travel. Now, there's news that an extraterritorial star continent is about to connect with the Starry Crescent land, and that star-catcher cloud fruit is on that extraterritorial star continent. After a pause, Feng Hanqiu continued, "Unfortunately, I heard that the extraterritorial star continent is restricted by the laws of heaven and earth. Only kings below the quasi-god realm can enter. Otherwise, junior brother Jun, you or I can go and see if it's true. We'll definitely get one for you." Yixing asked, "Is this news reliable?" Feng Hanqiu said, "It's reliable. Forces like the Astral Elephant Palace have also sent kings to search for it. Moreover, the quasi-god Jin Hongqing of the Golden Lion sect entered that extraterritorial star continent 1,000 years ago and obtained a star-catcher cloud fruit. This has a lot to do with him becoming a quasi-god." Yixing said, "Since that extraterritorial star continent might have star-catcher cloud fruit, then I'll have to try my luck and see if I can get one. If I'm lucky enough to get it, then the destruction of the Astral Elephant Palace will hasten." Yixing had the void-piercing divine eyes that could see through space. If that extraterritorial star continent really had star-catcher cloud fruit, it definitely wouldn't be able to escape his eyes. He would definitely go and search for it himself. Feng Hanqiu said, "Although the news is reliable, we can't rule out the possibility that the Astral Elephant Palace deliberately made up fake news to kill you when you go to the extraterritorial star continent. I'll send Guang Tian and Feng Yang with divine weapons to go with you." Yixing nodded and said, "Qing Xian will also go with me. Then I'll have to trouble Emperor Guang Tian and Emperor Feng Yang." Another month passed and it was time for the extraterritorial star continent to connect with the Starry Crescent land. Yixing, Qing Xian, Emperor Guang Tian, and Emperor Feng Yang left the Big Dipper sword sect. Feng Hanqiu and Feng Junhua sent them all the way to the extraterritorial star continent. Chapter 866. With Feng Hanqiu and Feng Junhua escorting them, they did not encounter any accidents along the way. Soon, they arrived at the place where the Starry Crescent land was connected to the extraterritorial starland. It was located in a valley among the mountains, and there was a space crack. Yixing, Wei Qingxian, Emperor Vast Sky, and Emperor Feng Yang passed through the space crack and entered the extraterritorial starland. Feng Hanqiu and Feng Junhua gave it a try. Just as the news said, they were blocked by the rules of heaven and earth. In the extraterritorial starland, Yixing and the other three appeared in the sky above a mountain range. They were surrounded by endless mountains. The four landed on the mountain range and looked around. Yixing and Wei Qingxian even used their eye techniques to look into the distance to check out the environment. Yixing looked into the distance until the end of the world. He roughly estimated that this was an extraterritorial starland with a radius of hundreds of thousands of miles. In addition, Yixing's expression was slightly surprised when he saw that there were a lot of natives living on this starland. These aborigines had the same facial features and limbs as normal humans. However, their height and physique were much higher than normal humans. An adult male was more than 3 meters tall and had terrifying muscles. Even the women were tall and strong. According to Yixing's estimation, the physical strength of these natives, regardless of whether they were male or female, would not be inferior to a Star Sea Realm king. More than 50% of the extraterritorial starland was ocean. Of the other 50%, 30% were mountains. The Aborigines only took up 20% of the extraterritorial starland. Even so, the number of Aborigines was astronomical. These Aborigines lived in tribes. The smaller tribes only had a few hundred people, while the larger tribes had millions. There were more than 10,000 tribes of various sizes, and more than a dozen tribes with millions of people. In fact, in the most central region of the star continent, there lived the largest tribe with tens of millions of people. It could no longer be called a tribe, but a huge country. The tall indigenous people had built a huge city with a radius of thousands of miles. In this city, Yixing found a star-catcher cloud fruit tree with dozens of star-catcher cloud fruits growing on the tree. Since he had come to the extraterritorial star continent for the star-catcher cloud fruit, Yixing had naturally made preparations. He had read through all the information regarding the star-catcher cloud fruit. Yixing sucked in a breath of cold air. In this city, about 70% of the people were adults, and all of them had the strength of a king. This meant that there were 30 to 40 million kings. Even if all the kings of the Starry Crescent land were to be added together, there would not be more than 100,000 of them. Yet, a tribe in a small extraterrestrial starland had 30 to 40 million natives who were as powerful as kings. Yixing saw many natives who were as powerful as high-level kings kneeling and praying to the star-catcher cloud fruit tree. It was obvious that the natives valued the star-catcher cloud fruit tree greatly. Moreover, the location of the star-catcher cloud fruit tree was surrounded by high walls. On top of the high walls, there were hundreds of natives standing guard at all times. Yixing was surprised. He carefully searched the huge city with tens of millions of natives and found a team of human kings. It was a team of 5, and all 5 of them were 9-star great emperors. Yixing recognized 4 of them. They were the Palace Master of the Star Elephant Palace, the Great Emperor of the Demon Ceiling Valley, the 9-Candle Great Emperor of the Dark Moon Palace, and the Golden Rock Great Emperor of the Golden Lion Sect. There was another Great Emperor that Yixing had seen outside the Star Elephant Palace, but he did not know which sect the Great Emperor belonged to. The 5 Great Emperors were hiding in the woods outside the city. Their auras were concealed and merged with the surroundings silently. Even if someone was nearby, they would not be discovered. However, under Yixing's void-penetrating god eyes, their disguise was not effective at all. Yixing easily saw through them with a glance. The vast heaven martial monarch asked when he saw Yixing's surprise, "Yixing, what did you find?" Yixing's void-penetrating god eyes were still looking into the distance. He smiled and said, "I saw some familiar faces. Xing Wanxiang, Fengju, Xianzhouju, Golden Rock, and a 9-star Great Emperor whose name I don't know. There are 5 of them in total. They are hiding outside the city with the star-catcher cloud fruit tree. I'm not sure if their target is the star-catcher cloud fruit tree in the city, or me." The vast heaven martial monarch was astounded and said, "The patriarchs of the 4 sects are all here. I'm afraid it's not as simple as the star-catcher cloud fruit. I think their real target is you." The wind sun martial monarch said, "That old man Feng Ju is here too." He's not easy to deal with. He's the strongest expert below the quasi-god realm. I'm afraid I can only fight against him with my godly weapon. If he were to bring his godly weapon, his strength would be on par with the quasi-gods. He won't be easy to deal with. The vast heaven martial monarch nodded. He was obviously intimidated by martial monarch Feng Zhu. Yixing grinned and said, "Don't worry, their ambush won't escape my eyes. They think they are hiding in the dark, but I'm actually hiding in the dark while they are out in the open. There's no way they can trick me." Saying this, Yixing continued to look into the distance and said, "I'll check this place first and see if there's anything else." The gaze of the void-breaking god, I traveled through the void, looking at land after land. When he saw the end of one direction, Yixing changed direction. With a radius of several 100,000 miles, it could be considered extremely vast. However, Yixing only used his eyes to roughly scan the area. How fast was his speed? In just a quarter of an hour, he had already seen more than half of this star land. When the gaze of the void-breaking god, I suddenly traveled through a large sea of fire, Yixing's face lit up with joy. It was the otherworldly flame. This sea of fire stretched for tens of thousands of miles and reached the edge of the star-catcher cloud continent. However, the sea of fire didn't stop there. Instead, it extended beyond the star-catcher cloud continent and turned into a long river of fire that scattered into the starry sky. It went to a place where Yixing couldn't see. Yixing saw an extremely terrifying flame energy in this sea of fire. It was even stronger than the flame torrent that Yixing had encountered in the starry sky. The otherworldly flame there must have reached the divine level. The area within 10,000 miles of this sea of fire was barren, without a single blade of grass. There were no indigenous people living within 10,000 miles of this sea of fire. Presumably, for the indigenous people of this star continent, this was simply a forbidden area. However, Yixing's joy grew as he looked at this terrifying sea of fire. He said, "I have a way to deal with them." The eyes of the vast Sky Emperor and the Wind Sun Emperor lit up. They asked at the same time, "What is it?" Yixing smiled and said, "My azure cloud wings can devour other types of azure metal to increase its grade. I have divine azure metal materials that can upgrade the azure cloud wings to a divine weapon. However, I don't have any divine azure metal flames on me. I found a large sea of fire at the edge of the star-catcher cloud continent. The flames there can increase the grade of my starfire seed. When my starfire seed evolves and refines the divine azure metal, my azure cloud wings will reach the divine level. Then, my speed will reach the quasi-god level, even faster than the average quasi-god. With the speed of a quasi-god, they will be in trouble." Chapter 867. Yixing and the other three did not go to the big city in the center of the star continent. Instead, they went to the sea of fire at the edge of the star continent. When they were 1,000 miles away from the sea of fire, the four of them felt extremely hot, as if their bodies were about to be incinerated. Yixing asked the other three to stop and said, "Qingxian, you guys wait outside. I will go and absorb the fire essence. It won't take long." Wei Qingxian nodded and said, "Be careful." Yixing smiled and activated the starfire seed. The heat was immediately reduced and he continued to move closer to the sea of fire. Supreme-grade imperial body, with an immortal body, Yixing's physical resistance to fire was stronger than the two 9-star Great Emperors, Vast Heaven Great Emperor and Wind Sun Great Emperor. In addition to the starfire seed and the defense of the Tao of Fire, Yixing stopped when he was about 100 miles away from the edge of the sea of fire. Although he was not in the sea of fire, the temperature was already very hot and the fire essence was not low. Swoosh! Yixing immediately used the black hole astrological form and turned into a huge black hole vortex. It spun rapidly and devoured the fire essence around him. At the same time, Yixing also activated the Star Fire Seed, and the Star Fire Seed also absorbed the fire essence. A huge amount of fire essence gathered in Yixing's body and even strengthened the vermilion bird astrological form. Yixing's understanding of the great Tao of fire also increased rapidly in the process of devouring the fire essence. Countless fire yuan qi shrouded Yixing, and Yixing almost turned into a man of fire. His resistance to fire became stronger and stronger. He continued to move forward and gradually walked into the sea of fire. In the end, Yixing walked 100 miles away from the sea of fire. When his resistance to fire reached a certain level, he directly entered the sea of fire. The fire essence in the sea of fire, whether it was the concentration or the quality, was much higher than outside the sea of fire. Yixing was like a whale sucking in water, madly devouring the fire essence. So the great Tao of fire has such a profound mystery. Good, this is really good. As Yixing devoured more and more fire essence, his comprehension of the grand Tao of fire became more and more profound. He gained many new insights and was overjoyed. The fire energy in this sea of fire was too surging. Yixing had been absorbing it for over 2 hours, but the surrounding fire energy was still endless. However, the star fire seed in his dantian had undergone a qualitative change. It had suddenly risen to a new level. The astral flame seed was white with a tinge of gray and contained a terrifying amount of energy. Even Yixing was shocked. If this astral flame seed struck a quasi-god, their divine body would be greatly damaged and their life force would be greatly damaged. After being burned for a long time, even an immortal would die. Clearly, the star fire seed's grade had been raised to the divine grade. Now that the quality of the astral flame seed had increased, Yixing's resistance to fire had also increased. Flames that could burn a quasi-god were nothing to Yixing now. Moreover, not only had the quality of Yixing's star fire seed increased, but the power of his vermilion bird aspect had also increased. It was now closer to the center of his forehead. Most importantly, Yixing's comprehension of the true meaning of fire had increased by leaps and bounds. It was just that he hadn't had enough time to completely digest it. If he had enough time to fully comprehend what he had learned today, Yixing's true meaning of fire might have a qualitative breakthrough. This sea of fire was simply a treasure trove for Yixing. Even if this starland didn't have the star-catcher cloud fruit, Yixing had still obtained a great harvest. After the quality of the star fire seed had increased, its power had stopped increasing. The vermilion bird aspect had also been strengthened to the limit. The vermilion bird on his aspect had become even more obvious. Yixing had also comprehended the true meaning of fire to a critical point. What he needed was time to digest it. Although the fire energy in this sea of fire was still surging, it was no longer of any use to Yixing. Yixing left the sea of fire. Looking at the smile on Yixing's face, Wei Qingxian and the other two knew that Yixing had gained a lot. Did you succeed? Wei Qingxian asked when Yixing walked in front of her. I succeeded. Yixing smiled slightly. His expression was full of joy as he said, next, it's time to upgrade the azure cloud wings to a divine artifact. In the Heavenly Bao continent, Yixing had obtained dozens of divine artifacts. Among them, 80% were low-grade divine artifacts. Some were weapons, some were defensive equipment, some were elixirs, some were materials, some were ancient books on formations, and some were secret manuals on cultivation techniques and martial arts. Among them, there was a divine green gold material. Yixing took it out. Yixing raised his hand and the azure cloud wings appeared in his palm. The star fire stirred, and the divine green gold was quickly melted and refined into the azure cloud wings. Not long after, the azure cloud wings produced a surge of aura. There was no wind in the surroundings, and the clouds surged in the sky. There were even strange flashes of light. A natural phenomenon, the birth of a divine artifact. The quality of the azure cloud wings had a huge leap. It had been upgraded from a top-grade Xian artifact to a low-grade divine artifact. Flying treasures were the most precious and rare. A low-grade flying divine artifact's value was no less than a middle-grade divine artifact. Even if a king had a low-grade flying divine artifact, his speed would be comparable to a quasi-god. If a quasi-god had a low-grade flying divine artifact, his speed would be much faster than a quasi-god of the same level. Being a little faster wasn't a big advantage. However, when one's speed reached a certain level and far surpassed the enemy's, it could be fatal. Yixing kept the azure cloud wings in his palm and they grew out from his back. They were about 1 zhang wide and weren't very big. However, the aura they exuded and the perfect lines of the wings were like flowing water. With a single glance, one could tell that the wings were terrifyingly fast. Emperor Vast Sky said excitedly, "Quickly try it and see how fast it can reach." Yixing nodded and disappeared with a whoosh. In the blink of an eye, he was already hundreds of miles away. Yixing estimated the distance. In one breath, he had flown more than 600 miles, almost 700 miles. A quasi-god of the first nirvana could generally fly about 600 miles in one breath. Therefore, Yixing's azure cloud wings was a little faster than most first nirvana quasi-gods. It was indeed a low-grade flying divine artifact. Other 5-star kings wouldn't be able to use it even if they had a low-grade flying divine artifact. There were 2 reasons why Yixing could use the god-grade azure cloud wings. First, Yixing had refined the azure cloud wings when it was a supreme-grade spirit artifact. He had been nourishing it with his aura and bloodline. It had long become one with Yixing. Therefore, Yixing could surpass levels. Second, Yixing's astral energy was much stronger than that of a 5-star king. Even a 7-star king would pale in comparison to Yixing. Therefore, it wasn't strange that Yixing could casually use the god-grade azure cloud wings. Yixing's figure flashed and he returned to Wei Qingxuan's group. He smiled and said, "Now, it's time to give them a big gift." Chapter 869. The 10,000 Elephant Emperor and the other 4 did not expect Yixing to suddenly shoot an arrow at them. The black flame arrow shuttled through the night sky and merged with the darkness. It was difficult to see it with one's eyes. In the blink of an eye, it had traveled hundreds of miles and arrived in front of the 10,000 Elephant Emperor and the other 4. This arrow was not aimed at any one of them. The power it contained was not strong and penetrating, but it was extremely explosive. As soon as it arrived in front of the 10,000 Elephant Emperor and the other 4, the power in the arrow exploded violently. Boom! An earth-shattering explosion. Yixing used the Sagittarius constellation and the power of the arrow was no less than a 9-star Great Emperor's full power attack. Although none of the 10,000 Elephant Emperor and the other 4 were directly hit by the black flame arrow, the terrifying explosive power was not to be underestimated. They quickly blocked the power of the explosion and revealed themselves from their hiding places. Yixing, on the other hand, was flapping the azure cloud wings with all his strength. His speed suddenly increased and he traveled 600 miles in a breath. In the blink of an eye, he had flown past the 5 great emperors. The indigenous people who were chasing Yixing from behind were stunned. Yixing could travel 600 miles in one breath. This speed was more than twice as fast as the fastest indigenous people. In the blink of an eye, Yixing had already widened the distance between them by several hundred miles. Yixing had achieved his goal. As long as he left, the indigenous people would not be able to catch up with him. They would definitely find trouble with the 10,000 Elephant Emperor and the others. Therefore, Yixing did not reduce his speed. He flew more than 1,000 miles in 2 blinks of an eye. Damn it, we've been tricked by this kid. The 5 great emperors blocked the power of the arrow's explosion and appeared in the calm void a few dozen miles away. Looking at Yixing's rapidly disappearing figure, the 10,000 Elephant Emperor roared angrily. Such a fast speed! He must have traveled 600 miles in a breath. This is a speed that only quasi-gods can achieve. The flying treasure behind Yixing must be a divine weapon. The Nine Candles Great Emperor looked at Yixing's figure in the distance and was stunned. Flying divine artifact. The Golden Rock Emperor sounded surprised. The divine artifacts themselves were extremely precious treasures. Each of the 7 sects in the Starry Crescent land only had a few divine artifacts. Some had 3 or 4, and some had only 1 or 2. At the very least, flying artifacts were even rarer. In the entire Starry Crescent land, only the Demon Sealing Valley had one. It was the treasure of the Demon Sealing Valley. At this moment, the indigenous people who had chased after Yixing were getting further and further away from him. They could only watch from afar and had nowhere to vent their anger. Their gazes immediately shifted to the 5 great emperors who were not far away. This caused the 5 great emperors to frown. These natives were not ordinary. Since they were able to chase out of the city the fastest, they were definitely the strongest group in the city. The weakest among them was probably a 7-star king, while the strongest was comparable to a 9-star great emperor. There were so many aborigines. Even if they all carried divine weapons, they did not dare to underestimate them. The 5 great emperors took out their divine artifacts at the same time. The only difference was that while the other 4 great emperors had taken out their divine artifacts, Great Emperor Fengju took out a pair of black wings. Great Emperor Wanxiang exclaimed, "The heavenly demon divine wings is the treasure of the Demon Sealing Valley. Brother Fengju, you have brought it with you." Great Emperor Fengju chuckled and said, "There is only one chance. If we miss it, it will be hard to come by again. Naturally, we have to be prepared. Brother Wanxiang, you guys deal with these natives. I will go after Yixing." Whoosh! As soon as he finished speaking, the heavenly demon divine wings behind Great Emperor Fengju flapped and his figure turned into a ray of black light and disappeared into the distance. The heavenly demon divine wings was a low-grade flying divine artifact. Great Emperor Fengju's astral energy was much denser than Yixing's. Thus, when he used the low-grade flying divine artifact, his speed was even faster than Yixing's, reaching a speed of 700 miles in a breath. Great Emperor Fengju was the #1 king of the Starry Crescent land. He was invincible under the quasi-god realm. The density of his astral energy was also second to none among the 9-star great emperors. Thus, when he used the low-grade flying divine artifact, he was naturally faster than the average 9-star great emperor. In fact, he was even faster than a first nirvana quasi-god. Great Emperor Wanxiang and the other 3 used their divine artifacts and quickly engaged in a fierce battle with the aborigines. Great Emperor Fengju's eyes locked onto Yixing's figure and chased after him with extreme speed. He would not stop until he killed Yixing. Yixing immediately realized that someone was chasing after him and was surprised. Looking back, he saw that it was Great Emperor Fengju who was using a low-grade flying divine artifact. Yixing suddenly realized that Great Emperor Fengju was also using a low-grade flying divine artifact. Moreover, Great Emperor Fengju's speed seemed to be even faster than his. In a breath's time, the distance between the two of them was only a few dozen miles. In less than a few dozen breaths, Great Emperor Fengju would be able to catch up. "You dare to chase after me alone?" As expected of the strongest king of the Starry Crescent land, hee. Yixing smirked coldly. 2 fists are no match for 4 hands. I wonder how many of them can you take on alone? Time passed by one breath after another. The distance between the two of them was getting closer and closer. When they were about 300 miles apart, Yixing waved his hand and the high-grade divine artifact, Starry Palace, appeared. Whoosh! 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 3 figures flew out from the Starry Palace. They were Wei Qingxian, Great Emperor Vast Heaven, and Great Emperor Feng Yang. The Starry Palace was different from other divine artifacts. It had a space within. Yixing had entered the city in the middle of the Starry Crescent land to steal the Starry Cloud fruit. He had let Wei Qingxian, Great Emperor Vast Heaven, and Great Emperor Feng Yang into the Starry Palace. After all, Yixing had comprehended the true intent of darkness. He could approach the Starry Cloud fruit tree silently in the dark. However, Wei Qingxian and the other two couldn't. Therefore, they could only hide. Now that Great Emperor Feng Ju was chasing after them, Yixing naturally let the three of them come out to face him together. Wei Qingxian and the other two appeared and flew to Yixing's side. The four of them locked their gazes on Great Emperor Feng Ju. Great Emperor Vast Heaven and Great Emperor Feng Yang took out their divine artifacts. Great Emperor Feng Ju stopped dozens of li away from the four of them. He faced Yixing's group alone without any fear. Feng Quangtian, Feng Yang, so the two of you came in as well. You even brought divine artifacts. Hee hee. Great Emperor Feng Ju laughed coldly. It seems like you're here to deliver a big gift to this emperor. Since you're here, then leave your lives here. As he spoke, Great Emperor Feng Ju raised his hands and a pair of black gloves appeared. The black gloves had a terrifying aura and were covered with twisted runes. It was also a divine artifact. The quasi-god Feng Hao of the Demon Sealing Valley had always been using this pair of gloves. Now, he was lending it to Great Emperor Feng Ju. It seemed like in order to kill Yixing and the extraterritorial Starry Continent, the other party had really put in a lot of effort. Great Emperor Feng Ju was the #1 king of the Starry Crescent land. He was invincible under the quasi-god realm. With a divine artifact, he could fight against a quasi-god realm 1 Nirvana. Now, Great Emperor Feng Ju had 2 divine artifacts. The gloves increased his attack power and the wings increased his speed. They were probably even more terrifying than a quasi-god realm 1 Nirvana. Chapter 870. He also has a pair of godly weapon gloves. He has 2 godly weapons, one that increases attack power and the other that increases speed. Vast Sky Emperor and Wind Sun Emperor exclaimed at the same time. Their expressions were ugly. Emperor Feng Ju was already difficult to deal with just 1 godly weapon, let alone 2. Vast Sky Emperor and Wind Sun Emperor were on high alert as if they were facing a great enemy. Yixing also frowned slightly. The fact that Emperor Feng Ju dared to chase after them alone meant that he had terrifying strength to rely on. Ha 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 ha. Emperor Feng Ju laughed as he glanced at Yixing's group with a smug expression. Are you afraid now? It's useless to be afraid. You'll die even if you're afraid. As he spoke, Emperor Feng Ju began to form hand seals. Hand seals were formed one after another. As soon as he finished speaking, dozens of hand seals slammed toward Yixing and the others. Yixing's eyes narrowed. Be careful, it's the demon sealing god-destroying seal. Feng Hao had used the demon sealing god-destroying seal before, and Yixing had seen it clearly. Emperor Feng Ju's demon sealing god-destroying seal was slightly weaker than quasi-god Feng Hao's, but it was still extremely powerful. Sky Dragon Mountain Suppressing Sword Art. Sky Sweeping Gale Sword Art. Vast Sky Emperor and Wind Sun Emperor instantly used their godly weapons and low-grade godly weapons. Of the 2 godly weapons, one was heavy and powerful, while the other was as fast as a shooting star and extremely sharp. They slammed into the hand seals viciously. Following a deep explosion and a sharp cracking sound, the combined attacks of Martial Monarch Vast Sky and Martial Monarch Feng Yang were even stronger than Martial Monarch Feng Ju's attacks. Martial Monarch Feng Ju's hand seals were either shattered or sliced in half before vanishing into thin air. Kill! Vast Sky Emperor and Wind Sun Emperor yelled at the same time. Their godly weapons shone brightly as they shot toward Emperor Fengju with blinding speed. Hee hee. Emperor Fengju sneered coldly. He had a feeling of disdain towards the two divine weapons that were attacking him. Whoosh! The heavenly demonic god wings suddenly flapped and heavenly monarch Fengju's figure instantly disappeared, turning into a black afterimage. His speed was too fast. Even Martial Monarch Vast Heaven and Martial Monarch Wind Sun could not see Martial Monarch Fengju's figure clearly despite being 9-star martial monarchs. Yixing and Wei Qingxian both activated their God-tier eye techniques at the same time. They were able to see Heavenly Emperor Fengju's movements clearly. To the left. Yixing suddenly shouted. Emperor Fengju quickly changed his position with the help of the heavenly demon wings, causing Emperor Vast Sky and Emperor Fengyang to lose their sense of direction. Then, he attacked from the left side of the two emperors, sending out 2 seals. The attack from before was only the demon sealing seal. Now, he was using the god-destroying seal. The demon sealing seal only sealed the enemy's attack, while the god-destroying seal killed the enemy's life. Their power was incomparable. If the god-destroying seal was strengthened by a god-tier weapon, Emperor Vast Sky and Emperor Fengyang would be severely injured and might even lose their lives. The heavenly demon wings was much more useful than the god-tier weapon glove. Emperor Vast Sky and Emperor Fengyang could deal with Emperor Fengju if they worked together. In fact, they might even be stronger. However, once Emperor Fengju used the speed of the heavenly demon wings, the two of them could not see Heavenly Emperor Fengju's figure clearly. At this moment, even if Heavenly Emperor Fengju did not have the god-tier weapon glove, he could still defeat the two of them with his speed. When Yixing shouted, Wei Qingxian and he attacked at the same time. One of them was an icy palm print that carried a chilling aura, while the other was a flaming bow shadow that carried a violent force. Bang! Bang! The icy palm print and the flaming bow shadow were instantly shattered into pieces. The spreading icy aura was also swept back in an instant. Yixing's strength was only at the level of a 9-star Great Emperor, and Wei Qingxian was only at the level of an 8-star Great Emperor. They were no match for Heavenly Emperor Fengju's attack. Although he broke their attacks from afar, the recoil was still strong. Yixing and Qingshuan's bodies shook violently as they staggered back and vomited blood. If it weren't for their supreme-grade imperial bodies, they would have been seriously injured by the recoil. What a terrifying power! Yixing thought. This gave him a direct understanding of the power of a quasi-god. The power of Heavenly Emperor Fengju's god-tier weapon glove was only comparable to an ordinary first nirvana quasi-god, but its power was still terrifying. Although Yixing and Wei Qingshuan's defense was destroyed in an instant, it wasn't in vain. It bought time for Heavenly Emperor Vast Sky and Heavenly Emperor Fengyang. The two of them immediately used their god-tier weapons to break through Heavenly Emperor Fengju's attack, and continued to attack Heavenly Emperor Fengju. Hee hee. Heavenly Emperor Fengju's figure disappeared in a flash, leaving behind a sneer. A speed of 600 miles per breath was too fast for a 9-star Great Emperor. As soon as Heavenly Emperor Fengju moved, Heavenly Emperor Vast Sky and Heavenly Emperor Fengyang completely lost their ability to determine his position. Yixing's god eye of void piercing had been observing Heavenly Emperor Fengju's figure. At the same time, he used his third astrology. Whoosh! A ray of starlight shot into the sky, turning into a huge black hole that hung high in the sky. The world of darkness instantly enveloped Heavenly Emperor Fengju. World of darkness. Heavenly Emperor Fengju was surprised. Then, a third eye opened on his forehead. The eyeball was filled with black runes. He chuckled, "The world of darkness can't affect me. All of you must die." What? Yixing was surprised. The black hole astrology was his last resort. If the black hole astrology could affect Heavenly Emperor Feng Zhu and cause him to fall into the world of darkness, Heavenly Emperor Vast Sky and Heavenly Emperor Feng Yang still had a chance to turn the tables. However, Heavenly Emperor Feng Zhu's eye technique could see through the darkness. The world of darkness of the black hole astrology couldn't affect Heavenly Emperor Feng Zhu. With Heavenly Emperor Feng Yang's speed, Heavenly Emperor Vast Sky and Heavenly Emperor Feng Yang would definitely lose. In the face of such extreme speed, even with Yi Xing's warning, Heavenly Emperor Vast Sky and Heavenly Emperor Feng Yang couldn't react in time. They could block it once, but they couldn't block it again and again. Therefore, Yi Xing didn't hesitate. He shouted, "Qing Xian, senior brothers, quickly enter the Stellar Palace." As he spoke, Yi Xing flew over with the Stellar Palace. Wei Qingxian, Heavenly Emperor Vast Sky, and Heavenly Emperor Feng Yang knew that they weren't Heavenly Emperor Feng Zhu's match. They didn't resist and were instantly sucked into the Stellar Palace. With a wave of his hand, Yi Xing withdrew the Stellar Palace in a streak of light. Then, he pushed the azure cloud wings to the limit and turned into a streak of light that flew away. At this moment, Yi Xing was running for his life. His speed was extraordinary, reaching the speed of 700 miles in a breath. Run. Do you think you can escape? Heavenly Emperor Feng Zhu snorted. He turned into a streak of light and chased after Yi Xing. Chapter 871. In the night sky, two streaks of light, one in front and one behind, streaked across the void at extreme speed. In front was Yi Xing and behind him was Heavenly Emperor Feng Zhu. Both of them were moving at a speed of 700 li per breath. Mountains, rivers, and earth receded rapidly in their vision. Even the void was pierced through by the two of them. It was almost no different from shuttling through the void. Originally, Heavenly Emperor Feng Zhu's speed was slightly faster than Yi Xing's with the Heavenly Demonic Divine Wings. But at this moment, Heavenly Emperor Feng Zhu was chasing while Yi Xing was running for his life. Naturally, the situation was different. Survival could greatly stimulate one's potential. Yi Xing was in such a state. His speed exceeded his usual limit and wasn't any slower than Heavenly Emperor Feng Zhu. Under such extreme speed, not only did Yi Xing circulate his astral energy to the limit, but he also pushed the azure cloud wings to the limit. The true intent of wind that greatly increased speed was also pushed to the limit. The azure cloud wings was only a low-grade flying divine tool. Its range of speed increase was fixed. Once it reached the limit, it couldn't go any faster. If he wanted to go faster, he would have to work on the Grand Tao of Wind. While Yi Xing was flying at extreme speed, the true intent of wind was pushed to the limits. His comprehension of the Grand Tao of Wind was also far greater than usual. Not only that, under the stimulation of life and death, Yi Xing's perception had also greatly increased. His true intent of wind, which was originally hard to make any progress, actually had a breakthrough now. There were signs of him breaking through to a higher level. Behind him, Heavenly Emperor Feng Zhu was very surprised that Yi Xing's speed could reach such a level. However, there was one thing that Heavenly Emperor Feng Zhu was certain of. His cultivation was higher than Yi Xing's and his astral energy was denser. He would definitely be able to maintain his speed for a longer period of time than Yi Xing. Heavenly Emperor Feng Zhu's laughter came from behind. Yi Xing, your speed has exceeded the limit. Although it's fast, your astral energy consumption has also increased. I wonder how long you can maintain this speed. Ha 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 ha. Once your astral energy fails and your speed slows down, I'll be able to catch up to you and make you die without a burial ground. Yi Xing turned a deaf ear to Heavenly Emperor Feng Zhu's words. Under this kind of extreme speed, and at the same time trying to deduce the true intent of wind, Yi Xing could no longer divert his attention to speak. However, Yi Xing's expression didn't change at all. He wasn't affected by Emperor Fengju at all. He was flying towards the Sea of Fire at the edge of the Starland. Although Yixing couldn't maintain this state for long, it wouldn't last for long. With one chasing and the other fleeing, Yixing flew to the edge of the Sea of Fire that was strong enough to burn a quasi-god. That blazing Sea of Fire contained an extremely terrifying fire energy. Yixing used the true intent of fire and the Star Fire Seed to protect his body and directly charged into the Sea of Fire. Heavenly Emperor Fengju came to a halt outside the Sea of Fire. His face was filled with astonishment. The fire energy within the Sea of Fire was terrifying even to him. He didn't dare to enter, but Yixing actually flew in just like that. Heavenly Demon God's Eye. Heavenly Emperor Fengju immediately used his eye technique. The third eye on his forehead opened and looked into the Sea of Fire. He saw Yixing flying in the Sea of Fire. The surrounding fire energy couldn't do anything to him. After flying for several thousand li in the Sea of Fire, Yixing finally stopped when he saw that Heavenly Emperor Fengju didn't enter. With a wave of his hand, he brought out the Stellar Hall and entered it in a flash. The Stellar Hall wasn't an ordinary divine tool. It could attack and defend. It even had a space inside that could store people. It had many different functions. Although the fire energy within the Sea of Fire was terrifying, it couldn't do anything to the Stellar Hall's material. Although Yixing couldn't destroy the Stellar Hall's power, the material of the Stellar Hall was enough to withstand the power of the Sea of Fire for quite some time. Inside the Stellar Hall, Wei Qingxian and the other two saw Yixing coming in. They hurriedly asked, "What's the situation?" Yixing said, "The other party has a flying divine tool. I can't shake them off. I'm currently in the Sea of Fire where I stopped before. Fengju dares to chase after me. However, he has an eye technique and can see the situation inside the Sea of Fire. He has been observing the situation outside the Sea of Fire." Heavenly Emperor Vast Heaven frowned and said, "What should we do? You can't use the Stellar Hall's power to block the fire energy. The Stellar Hall will gradually heat up. In the end, it will become as powerful as the fire in the Sea of Fire and burn a quasi-god to death." Yixing smiled faintly, "It's fine." Yixing raised his hand and 2 star-catcher cloud fruits appeared in his hand. He continued, "I didn't waste my time entering the city. I got 2 star-catcher cloud fruits. After Qingxian and I refine these fruits, we'll go find Fengju to settle the score. Star-catcher cloud fruits can raise a mid-level king's cultivation by 2 realms. Good, very good. When you become 7-star kings and wield divine weapons, you should be able to contend against quasi-gods. At that time, Fengju will have to face the consequences." Heavenly Emperor Vast Heaven and Heavenly Emperor Fengyang were overjoyed. Yixing gave one of the star-catcher cloud fruits to Wei Qingxian and said, "Let's refine it together." Wei Qingxian happily received it. The two of them immediately consumed the star-catcher cloud fruits and refined them. The star-catcher cloud fruits contained a vast amount of astral energy. As soon as they entered his stomach, Yixing felt the rich astral energy rush through his body like a surging river. The astral energy in his body strengthened at an extremely fast speed. Yixing could clearly feel that his cultivation base was rising steadily. It was not even enough to describe it as 1,000 miles a day. Originally, after breaking through to the 5-star king realm, Yixing had already consolidated his cultivation base to the late stage of the 5th-star king realm. Not long after consuming the star-catcher cloud fruit, Yixing's cultivation base had reached the peak of the 5th-star king realm, showing signs of breaking through to the 6th-star king realm. As for Wei Qingxian, her cultivation was 1 level higher than Yixing's. She was already at the peak of the 5th stage. When Yixing felt that he was about to break through to the 6th-star king realm, a powerful aura erupted from Wei Qingxian. Her cultivation had already broken through. Very soon, Yixing also broke through to the 6-star king realm. The process was extremely smooth, and there were no obstructions at all. After becoming 6-star kings, Yixing and Wei Qingxuan's cultivation levels continued to rise. Their auras also gradually became more and more powerful. 6th level early stage. 6th level middle stage. 6th level late stage. 6th level peak stage. It was only when their cultivation had reached the peak of the 6th level that the two of them felt a slight obstruction, and they were no longer as unstoppable as before. However, the power of the stars in his body was still surging. It seemed that breaking through to the 7-star king realm wouldn't be a problem. It was just that it would take a little longer than breaking through to the 6-star king realm. A violent aura radiated from Wei Qingxuan's body. She was one step ahead of Yixing again, breaking through to the 7-star king realm. The sovereign bloodline and the purple heavens were indeed the highest talents on the path of cultivation. Yixing calmed himself down. The aura emanating from Wei Qingxuan's breakthrough didn't affect him at all. His mind was completely focused on cultivation as he advanced step by step toward becoming a 7-star king. 2 hours after Wei Qingxian broke through, an even more surging aura erupted. Yixing's cultivation finally broke through this step, reaching the 7th layer of the astral sea realm, jumping into the ranks of high-level king tiers. Chapter 873. Seeing Yixing emerge from the sea of fire, the eyes of the 5 emperors lit up with murderous intent. Yixing took out the starry palace. Wei Qingxian, Emperor Vast Sky, and Emperor Feng Yang walked out from the starry palace and stood beside Yixing. They looked at the 5 emperors from afar with murderous intent. He. Emperor Feng Ju looked at Yixing and the other 3 and laughed coldly. Finally, you can't withstand the burning of the flames. Unfortunately, you'll still die after leaving the sea of fire. Yixing and Wei Qingxian both had supreme-grade imperial bodies. When they didn't release their cultivation, no one could tell their cultivation base. Emperor Feng Ju didn't expect that in just a few hours, Yixing and Wei Qingxian had both become 7-star kings. Compared to a few hours ago, their strength was worlds apart. Emperor Wanxiang and the others had sinister smiles on their faces. They took out the weapons in their hands. Terrifying auras swept out in all directions, causing the void to tremble. Yixing's gaze swept across Emperor Feng Ju and the others. He laughed coldly and said, "We still don't know who will die." The green sandalwood divine bow appeared in Yixing's hands. He took a deep breath and drew the bow. The bow was a special weapon. It had the most destructive power. The arrows shot out from a middle-grade bow were much more destructive than other middle-grade weapons. Even though God Monarch Feng Ju and the others weren't quasi-gods, so they were unable to accurately determine the tier of the god artifact just by comparing it to their own god artifacts, they could tell that Yixing's god bow was much stronger than theirs. Emperor Feng Ju and the others felt their hearts skip a beat. They felt a piercing energy that sent chills down their spines. This power caused the 5 of them to feel a sense of fear. However, their eyes were filled with excitement. Looking at the azure sandalwood divine bow, the myriad forms emperor's eyes lit up. He shouted, "He really does have other divine weapons. This divine bow's aura is even stronger than ours. It might be a mid-rank divine weapon. Don't let him shoot an arrow." As he spoke, the myriad elephant emperor brandished his divine weapon and charged at Yixing. Emperor Feng Ju and the other emperors attacked at the same time. On Yixing's side, Wei Qingxian, Emperor Vast Sky, and Emperor Feng Yang attacked at the same time. Wei Qingxian was wearing a low-grade divine weapon, the ice silkworm cold silk gloves. She performed the self-created black tortoise's freezing wind ice palm. With a single palm strike, the area of dozens of miles in front of her turned into ice and frost. Pure white extremely cold energy surged out. Emperor Vast Sky and Emperor Feng Yang used the Big Dipper Sword Sex Heavenly Dragon Mountain Suppressing Sword Art and Heaven Shaking Gale Sword Art. The 5 emperors attacked at the same time. Emperor Vast Sky and Emperor Feng Yang only blocked 2 of the emperor's attacks. Emperor Feng Zhu, Emperor Wanxiang, and Emperor Jiu Zhu's attacks seemed to be heading for Yixing. They were instantly enveloped by the pure white aura. Icy palms landed on the 3 emperors' attacks. When Wei Qingxian was a 5-star king, she had used the freezing ice palm against Emperor Feng Zhu. However, it had little effect and was destroyed in an instant. At this moment, Wei Qingxian was using the same martial art, but the difference in power was like heaven and earth. When the icy palms collided with the weapons, the 3 emperors immediately felt a terrifying backlash. Especially the pure white aura. It froze the weapons of the emperors, greatly reducing their speed. Emperor Feng Zhu was shocked. He had seen Wei Qingxuan's strength before. How did it suddenly increase to such a level? It wasn't any weaker than the attack of a quasi-god. Of course, Wei Qingxuan's frigid astral qi was still weak compared to the combined attack of the Sealing Zhu Emperor, Myriad Elephant Emperor, and 9 Candle Emperor. In just a blink of an eye, the ice shattered and the frigid astral qi in the air dispersed. However, the blink of an eye was more than enough for Yixing. On the green sandalwood divine bough, a black flame arrow had already completely condensed and shot out explosively. Dark Wind Fire Arrow Art. 3 true intents of the Tao gathered in the black flame arrow. Among them, the true intents of wind and fire had already reached the small success stage. Coupled with the might of the mid-grade divine bow, the power of this arrow was shocking. Bang! 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 3 explosions sounded at the same time. The weapons of Emperor Wanxiang and Emperor Jiu Zhu were sent flying back. Emperor Feng Zhu's demon sealing seal instantly exploded. Although the attacks of the 3 great emperors were affected by Wei Qingxuan's chilly aura, they were still shocked that Yixing's arrow had defeated them. Their hearts skipped a beat. Emperor Feng Zhu was the most shocked. He exclaimed, "How is this possible? You've become a 7-star king and your strength has increased to such a level." Then, Emperor Feng Zhu's expression froze. He suddenly thought of something and yelled, "You've consumed the star catcher cloud fruit." Yixing sneered. 3 rays of starlight shot out from his glabella. He had used 3 different astrological aspects. The Black Hole Constellation, Sagittarius Constellation, and Vermilion Bird Constellation hung high in the sky. Yixing drew the azure sandalwood divine bow again. Murderous intent enveloped Emperor Feng Zhu and the others. The world of darkness formed by the black hole astrological aspect also enveloped the 5 emperors. At the same time, the Sagittarius constellation and the Vermilion Bird astrological aspect poured down surging stellar energy. The Sagittarius constellation's stellar energy was filled with extreme penetrative power, increasing the lethality of the arrow. The Vermilion Bird astrological aspect increased the power of the flame within the arrow, greatly increasing its offensive power. A black flame arrow formed on the azure sandalwood divine bow. Whether it was its offensive power or penetrative aura, it was more than twice as strong as before. What was even more terrifying was that this arrow contained extreme spatial binding power. Wherever the arrow was pointed at, the void around it would instantly solidify like an iron wall. Emperor Feng Zhu and the others all felt a terrifying invisible force that imprisoned them. It was as if a quasi-god was suppressing them. They were already shocked when they were trapped in the world of darkness. Now, they were even more terrified. Emperor Feng Zhu had the heavenly demon god eye and Emperor Jiu Zhu had comprehended the true meaning of darkness. They weren't affected by the world of darkness. However, the 2 of them were even more terrified when they saw the black flame arrow leave the azure sandalwood divine bow. Heavenly demon god wings. Grand Emperor Sealju immediately used the power of his flying divine item to cut through the void, breaking the binding force. Grand Emperor Sealju turned into a ray of light and flew away, covering hundreds of li in a breath. Although he had broken through the binding force, his speed was affected. The arrow pierced through the air. Emperor Jiuzhu didn't have a flying divine weapon, so he couldn't move or dodge under the spatial binding power. He wanted to use his divine weapon to save them, but it was too late. He could only watch as the black flame arrow pierced his head. Bang! Emperor Jiuzhu's head instantly exploded, turning into bits of flesh and blood. At the same time, Wei Qingxian, Emperor Vast Heaven, and Emperor Feng Yang's attacks also hit the three emperors of myriad forms. They were trapped in the world of darkness and restricted by the spatial binding power. They couldn't dodge and didn't know where the attacks were coming from. Naturally, they couldn't block them and suffered fatal injuries. They screamed and died one after another. Chapter 874. In the blink of an eye. Apart from Sealju, the other four great emperors lost their lives in the blink of an eye. Even if they had divine weapons, they couldn't protect themselves. Under the influence of the space-binding technique, Emperor Fengju was only able to escape 400 li in the blink of an eye. This speed was extremely fast for a 9-star great emperor, but it was extremely slow for a quasi-god. Yixing pulled the string of the green sandalwood divine bow again. In the blink of an eye, another black flame arrow was formed. This time, Sealju wasn't affected by the spatial binding. His heavenly demon divine wings were pushed to the limit, allowing him to escape 1,000 li in the blink of an eye. However, when the black flame arrow on the green sandalwood divine bow was formed and locked onto Sealju's figure, Sealju felt the spatial binding enveloping him. The heavenly demon divine wings sliced through the void, shattering the spatial binding. However, his speed was reduced to 400 li in the blink of an eye. Yixing took a step forward and flapped his green cloud wings. He was like a green light streaking across the sky, traveling 1,000 li in the blink of an eye. He was almost twice as fast as Sealju. The distance between the two shrunk to a few hundred li in the blink of an eye. Yixing released the bowstring and the black flame arrow shot out from the green sandalwood divine bow. At this moment, Grand Emperor Fengju flew a few hundred miles forward with all his might. He was about 1,000 miles away from Yixing. However, in a single breath, the black flame arrow shot out 1,000 miles and hit Grand Emperor Fengju squarely. A mid-grade divine bow had a range of a few thousand li. Even if it was at its peak, it would still reach 3,000 li. Yixing couldn't unleash the full power of a mid-grade divine bow, but it wasn't a problem for him to reach 1,000 li at its peak. The black flame arrow pierced through Sealju's back and exited his chest. A terrifying power exploded within Sealju's body. With a loud explosion, Sealju's body was torn into pieces. Blood rained down from the sky. He was dead on the spot. Even with a low-grade flying divine tool, he couldn't escape death in front of a mid-grade divine bow. Moreover, Yixing's green cloud wings was also a low-grade flying divine tool. His speed was much faster than Sealju's eyes. Sealju didn't even have a 10% chance of escaping. With a flap of the azure cloud wings, Yixing appeared at the place where Emperor Fengju died. He grabbed the heavenly demonic divine wings, the low-grade divine weapon gloves, and Emperor Fengju's storage ring. In the blink of an eye, Yixing erased the seal in the storage ring and probed it with his spiritual power. As the leader of a sect and the #1 king of Starry Crescent Land, Emperor Fengju's storage ring was filled with valuable treasures. However, the truly valuable items were his two divine weapons. Needless to say, the heavenly demon divine wings were even more valuable. The value of a low-grade flying divine weapon was almost equivalent to a mid-grade divine weapon. Yixing found 5 star-catcher cloud fruits in the ring. Sealed Ju chased Yixing all the way here and didn't leave. It was obvious that Myriad Elephant Emperor and the others had broken into the city in the middle of the Star Continent and taken the star-catcher cloud fruits. The 10,000 Elephant Emperor and the other 3 all possessed divine weapons that were extremely lethal to the strongest aboriginals. Although the aboriginals had the advantage in numbers, they were still at a disadvantage against the 4 divine weapons. Otherwise, the 10,000 Elephant Emperor and the other 3 wouldn't have been able to pluck so many star-catcher cloud fruits. Wei Qingxian, Vast Sky Emperor, and Wind Sun Emperor brought the divine tools and storage rings to Yixing and handed them over to Yixing. It was obviously because of Yixing that they were able to win the battle. With Yixing's power, he could easily suppress the 5 great emperors on his own. Yixing still had a few mid-grade divine tools and more than 20 low-grade divine tools. To the cultivators of the Starry Crescent Land, divine tools were extremely precious, but they weren't enough for Yixing. Therefore, Yixing handed them over to Vast Sky Emperor. Yixing then checked through the Myriad Elephant Emperor's storage ring. The items inside were similar to sealed Jews. They were all extremely precious treasures for high-level kings, but they weren't enough for Yixing. However, there were a few star-catcher cloud fruits in each ring. There were a total of 34 star-catcher cloud fruits. Including the 2 that Yixing had taken, there were 36 star-catcher cloud fruits. To kings, the star-catcher cloud fruits were priceless treasures that couldn't be bought. However, to quasi-gods, they were useless. Yixing and Wei Qingxian already had the star-catcher cloud fruits, so consuming them would no longer be of any use to them. Therefore, Yixing handed over the star-catcher cloud fruits and their storage rings to Great Monarch Vast Heaven as the Big Dipper Sword Sect's resources. The star-catcher cloud fruit was extremely beneficial to a 9-star martial emperor's breakthrough to the quasi-god realm. With so many star-catcher cloud fruits, Martial Emperor Vast Heaven and Martial Emperor Feng Yang would definitely be able to consume one each. Perhaps, they might even become quasi-gods in the future. Since all the star-catcher cloud fruits had been taken, Yixing and the others didn't go to the center of the Starry Crescent Land. Instead, they left the Starry Crescent Land through the passage connecting the Starry Crescent Land. When they returned to the Starry Crescent Land, Feng Hanqiu and Feng Junue, the 2 quasi-gods, were waiting nearby. As soon as Yixing and the others came out, the 2 of them went to welcome them. Seeing that Yixing was safe, their eyes were filled with smiles. Feng Hanqiu asked, "How was it? How was the harvest?" Yixing smiled. Vast Sky Emperor said excitedly, "Great harvest. Ha ha ha. Great harvest." Feng Junue said happily, "It seems that you have successfully obtained the star-catcher cloud fruits. Yixing and Qingxian have broken through, right?" Yixing and Wei Qingxian both nodded with smiles on their faces. Feng Yang Emperor said excitedly, "It's not just the star-catcher cloud fruits. Not only did we get all the star-catcher cloud fruits, but we also got 5 divine weapons and a flying divine weapon." 5 divine weapons and a flying divine weapon? Feng Hanqiu and Feng Junue both took a deep breath when they heard this. They were pleasantly surprised. Feng Hanqiu said, "A flying divine weapon? Is that the Demon Sealing Valley's treasure, the heavenly demon wings?" Vast Sky Emperor and Feng Yang Emperor nodded. Feng Hanqiu was overjoyed and laughed. "The Demon Sealing Valley is willing to take out such a treasure. Ha! Since the treasure is in your hands, they must be in deep trouble." Feng Yang Emperor smiled. "Of course. Junior Yixing has broken through and his strength has increased greatly. I think even a first Nirvana quasi-god would be no match for him when he wields a divine weapon." The 5 great emperors were all killed effortlessly. At this time, Yixing opened his void-breaking god eye and looked around. He found Star Silver Death, Xing Qingji, and the others tens of thousands of miles away. Murderous intent flashed in his eyes. Yixing said, "Star Silver Death and the others are nearby. Let's go pay them a visit. I owe a lot of chapters and haven't paid them back. I'm very sorry. Tomorrow is a new year and there should be a new atmosphere. I'm going to update 8 times to apologize. After midnight, there will be 4 chapters in a row. Tomorrow at 6 p.m., there will be another 4 chapters in a row. Brothers, please support me." Chapter 875. There were 6 quasi-gods on the other side. They were Xing Yinhua, Xing Qingji, Feng Xiaoyuan, Feng Nongying, Xian Yuan, and Jin Hongqing. Other than Xing Yuehong and Feng Xiaoyuan guarding the sept, the other quasi-gods were all gathered here. Xing Yinhua and the others all opened their divine eyes to observe the situation at the entrance. They also wanted to know if Yixing had been killed by Feng Ju, Xing Wanxiang, and the others in the extraterritorial starland. However, when they saw Yixing and the others come out, their expressions changed. They were so well prepared that the Demon Sealing Valley even gave the Demon Sealing Valley's heavenly demon wings to Emperor Feng Ju. Quasi-god Feng Hao also lent his divine weapon to Emperor Feng Ju, allowing Emperor Feng Ju, who was already invincible among kings, to reach the quasi-god level. Their purpose was to ensure that their plan was foolproof. However, their plan still failed. Yixing was not dead and had returned from the extraterritorial starland alive and well. Feng Xiaoyuan clenched his fists and shouted, "Damn it! How is this kid still alive?" Xing Qingji was also shocked and angry. What are Xing Wanxiang, Feng Ju, and the others doing with their divine weapons? Yixing came back alive. What should we do? With Feng Hanqiu and Feng Junue guarding him and Lu Xinghong and Qiu Minjun supporting him at any time, we can't kill him. Although they had 6 quasi-gods present and the Big Dipper sword sect only had Feng Hanqiu and Feng Junue, and Lu Xinghong and Qiu Minjun were not present, Xing Qingji also thought that there was no chance to kill Yixing. This was because Feng Hanqiu and Feng Junue could hold on for a long time with their middle-grade divine weapons. As for Lu Xinghong and Qiu Minjun, once they received the news, they could use the teleportation formation to rush over in 15 minutes. In such a short time, they could not break through Feng Hanqiu and Feng Junue's defense. Once Lu Xinghong and Qiu Minjun arrived, even with the help of Xing Yuehong and Feng Hao, they were no match for them, let alone the 6 quasi-gods. Feng Nongying suddenly said, "They're coming toward us." Whether it was in terms of strength or constitution, a quasi-god's physical body had undergone nirvanic rebirth. Their eyesight was also 10 times stronger than a king's. The martial Tao's divine eye could see tens of thousands of li, and as they underwent nirvanic rebirth, they could see up to hundreds of thousands of li. The other quasi-gods naturally saw Yixing and the others heading their way. Starsilver Death's gloomy eyes flashed with a bright light. Starsilver Death said, "Maybe Feng Han, Qiu Feng, and Jun you know that Yixing was attacked in the extraterritorial star land and are here to settle accounts with us. Hee. If they dare to attack, then this will be a great opportunity to kill Yixing." Feng Hanqiu and Feng Junue defended themselves with their mid-grade divine weapons. The 6 of them couldn't do anything to them. However, if Feng Hanqiu and Junue took the initiative to attack, then the situation would be different. As long as they could stall them for a breath's time, the other quasi-gods would have a chance to kill Yixing. Once a quasi-god unleashed their full strength, killing a king would be as easy as stepping on an ant. Even though Emperor Vast Sky and Emperor Feng Yang had divine weapons, Starsilver Death didn't think much of them. As for Yixing, he naturally didn't think much of him. In Starsilver Death's eyes, the only troublesome ones were Feng Hanqiu and Feng Junue. If the 2 of them focused on defense, it would be fine. If the two of them dared to attack, Starsilver Death was confident that he could hold them back for 1 or 2 breaths, giving the other quasi-gods enough time to kill Yixing. Thinking of this, Starsilver Death narrowed his eyes. His killing intent intensified. Before long, Yixing and the others arrived in front of Starsilver Death and the other quasi-gods. They stopped 100 li away. The two sides looked at each other intensely. Before they spoke, the atmosphere was already filled with killing intent. Yixing scanned the 6 of them and said, "Your 4 sects have already compensated and asked for peace, but you sent 5 emperors with divine weapons to kill me in the extraterritorial star land. It seems that you don't want peace anymore." Starsilver Death snorted and said, "In the extraterritorial star land, even martial artists of the same sect can fight over treasures. You all went to fight for the star catcher cloud fruit. What's wrong with them wanting to kill you?" After a pause, Starsilver Death continued, "Since you already know about the 5 of them, where are they?" The 5 emperors all had divine weapons. Especially Emperor Fengju, who had the heavenly demon divine wings. In terms of threat, they were even more threatening than Quasi-God 1 Nirvana. Starsilver Death had never imagined that the 5 emperors would die at the hands of Yixing's group. Yixing smiled and said, "You're right. There's nothing wrong with killing each other in order to fight for the star catcher cloud fruit. So I killed Fengju, Xing Wanxiang, and the others." Starsilver Death and the other 5 quasi-gods all looked shocked. "I killed them all. I killed them all." This sentence resounded in the ears of the 6 quasi-gods like thunder. It lingered for a long time. Emperor Fengju, Xing Wanxiang, and the other 4 emperors had divine weapons. Emperor Fengju alone was more terrifying than a quasi-god 1 Nirvana. The other 4 emperors working together with divine weapons were no weaker than a quasi-god 1 Nirvana. So, if Yixing really killed Emperor Fengju and the others, it would be as shocking as killing 2 quasi-gods. "You killed them all," Xing Qingji exclaimed. His eyes were filled with shock and disbelief. He shouted, "That's impossible. Based on your..." Before Xing Qingji could finish, Yixing interrupted him. "Based on my... Not only did I kill the 5 of them, I also want to kill you, Xing Qingji." As he spoke, Yixing raised his hand, and the celestial palace appeared in his hand. Yixing continued, "Xing Qingji, you still recognize this celestial palace, right? Back then, you poisoned Emperor Xing Han in order to snatch the celestial palace. In the end, Emperor Xing Han used the space-breaching talisman to take the celestial palace away. In the end, I obtained it. Today, I will avenge Emperor Xing Han by killing you, old thing." The celestial palace disappeared in a flash from Yixing's hand. It was put away by Yixing. Xing Qingji watched the celestial palace disappear in a flash, but the greed in his eyes did not diminish. He said angrily, "I went through the Nirvana tribulation and became a quasi-god. You want to kill me? What a joke. Come and try to kill me if you have the guts." Feng Xiaoyuan said coldly from the side, "You talk big, but don't turn out to be a coward when the time comes for us to see who's better." These words were obviously meant to provoke Xing Qingji. In Feng Xiaoyuan's opinion, Xing Qingji was a veteran quasi-god 1 Nirvana and was definitely not someone a little king like Yixing could contend against. After all, even a 9-star king was very far away from a quasi-god. It was an insurmountable gap. As for Yixing, the cultivation that he revealed in the previous battle was only that of a 4-star king. Even if he obtained the star cloud fruit in the extraterritorial star land and raised his cultivation by 2 levels, he was only a 6-star king. Even if Yixing had a breakthrough in his cultivation along the way, his cultivation could only reach star sea level 7 at most. In the battle between a 7-star king and a quasi-god 1 Nirvana, if one was not familiar with Yixing, one would know that the quasi-god 1 Nirvana would definitely win. Happy New Year, brothers. Chapter 876. Yixing smiled slightly. Today, he had already made up his mind to kill Xing Qingji and avenge Xing Han Great Emperor. There was no need for others to provoke him. Yixing's gaze sharpened as he said, "Xing Qingji, then let's have a battle of life and death. No escape, no interference, until one side is dead. How about that? No escape, no interference, until one side is dead." When Yixing stated these three conditions, Xing Qingji only felt joy in his heart. These were also the conditions he wanted to propose. Otherwise, with Feng Hanqiu and Feng Junwei watching from the side, it would not be easy to kill Yixing. However, Yixing's gaze was extremely penetrating. It had a feeling that it went straight to the heart and soul, making Xing Qingji feel very uncomfortable. Xing Qingji was still very confident. He ignored the slight discomfort he felt and chuckled. "Good," he said. "Come, I'd like to see what tricks a little king like you can play." As soon as he finished speaking, Xing Qingji flashed into the distance like a stream of light. In a breath, he was 600 miles away. The killing intent in Yixing's eyes gradually solidified. The azure cloud wings appeared on his back. His figure was also like a stream of light, also moving 600 miles in a breath. He was still 100 miles away from Xing Qingji. Seeing the azure cloud wings on Yixing's back, Xing Qingji smiled coldly and said, "I was wondering why you dared to fight with me. It turns out that you have a flying divine tool. Ha! This is a good treasure. I'll take it as a gift from you to me." As he spoke, Xing Qingji attacked like lightning. At the same time, he used the saint-level celestial form, the white tiger celestial form. On a golden star, there was a huge shadow of a white tiger, roaring at the sky. Boom! In the blink of an eye, Xing Qingji had already taken out his divine weapon, the Vajra heaven-suppressing seal. The seal became as big as a mountain and shone with golden light. With terrifying power, it suppressed Yixing. Although the Vajra heaven-suppressing seal was huge, its speed was not slow. It covered a distance of 100 miles in an instant. However, compared to Yixing's speed, the Vajra heaven-suppressing seal was too slow. With a flap of the azure cloud wings, Yixing was like a streak of light, easily evading the Vajra heaven-suppressing seal's attack. Ha! Xing Qingji's expression turned surprised. His attack speed was much faster than his movement speed, exceeding 400 kilometers in one breath. He was even faster than a second Nirvana quasi-god's movement speed. However, Yixing easily dodged his attack. This was truly strange. This meant that Yixing's speed was far beyond 600 miles per breath. Could it be a mid-grade flying-type divine artifact? Xing Qingji thought to himself. As for minor accomplishment true intent of wind, Xing Qingji did not even consider it. As a quasi-god, he was very clear about how difficult it was to achieve minor accomplishment true intent. Yixing was the true king. To be able to achieve peak minor accomplishment true intent of wind was already very heaven-defying. Whoosh! Before Xing Qingji could think any further, an astral arrow suddenly pierced through the air. Yixing had used the Sagittarius constellation and the Vermilion Bird constellation. Yixing's movement speed was too fast. In an instant, he was behind Xing Qingji, giving Xing Qingji a huge shock. In an instant, golden light bloomed from Xing Qingji's body, forming a golden light shield to protect him. Meanwhile, the Vajra heaven-suppressing seal swept out a golden light blade that slashed behind him. Relying on the strength of his protective aura and the vitality of his divine body, Xing Qingji forcefully endured Yixing's astral arrow and seized the opportunity to attack Yixing wildly. The astral arrow had just touched the golden light shield when the golden light blade that filled the sky had already slashed toward him. Xing Qingji's judgment of the astral arrow's penetrative power was severely mistaken. His golden light shield was like a bubble that was pierced by Yi Xing's finger. The sharp astral arrow instantly pierced into Xing Qingji's divine body. However, this sharp astral arrow left as quickly as it came. Just as the golden light blade was about to strike Yi Xing's body, Yi Xing suddenly retreated hundreds of miles away. The attack of the golden light blade missed. This speed not only shocked Xing Qingji, but also the quasi-gods in the distance. With such extreme speed, it was extremely difficult to even touch the other party. Xing Qingji was not in a good situation. Whoosh! In the blink of an eye, Yi Xing charged over from another direction. It was still a finger energy arrow with extreme speed and piercing power. After his previous experience, Xing Qingji simply combined his astral energy with his divine body to protect the surface of his body. The Vajra heaven-suppressing seal also slashed out golden light blades toward Yi Xing. Xing Qingji was very confident in his divine body. He had an immortal body, so it was not difficult for him to take Yi Xing's attack head-on. However, Yi Xing was only a king. As long as he was hit once, he would lose his life. Xing Qingji would never have expected that Yi Xing also had an immortal body. However, Yi Xing did not use his immortal body to fight desperately. They both had immortal bodies, but as a quasi-god, Xing Qingji's vitality was much higher than Yi Xing's. Fighting desperately was not worth it for Yi Xing. Moreover, with Yi Xing's strength, there was no need for him to fight desperately. Yi Xing attacked Xing Qingji from different directions time and time again. Xing Qingji relied on the advantage of his divine body and remained as immovable as a mountain. He used the astral energy from the Vajra heaven-suppressing seal to counterattack. Soon, the two had exchanged dozens of blows. Every time, Yi Xing's astral arrow penetrated Xing Qingji's external defense and caused some damage to his divine body. However, just as the power was about to fully erupt, the golden light blades arrived and Yi Xing immediately retreated. Although Yi Xing's clothes were not touched by Xing Qingji, the slight injury that Xing Qingji suffered was no different from being uninjured. Yi Xing, your attack is like a mosquito bite. It can't do anything to me. I only need to attack once to kill you. Come on. I'll see how many times you can dodge. Xing Qingji shouted. Although he was shocked by Yi Xing's strength, he was still very confident. Although Yi Xing was extremely fast, Xing Qingji believed that he was in an invincible position. If Yi Xing escaped, he would not be able to catch up. However, the two had agreed to fight to the death. As long as Yi Xing dared to continue fighting to the death, he was confident that he would be able to hit Yi Xing once and kill Yi Xing. Whoosh! Another ray of starlight shot into the sky. Yi Xing used the black hole astrology, and the world of darkness instantly enveloped Xing Qingji. Yi Xing shuttled through the world of darkness without making a sound. The astral energy from his astral energy arrows appeared and disappeared mysteriously, making it even harder to guard against. Xing Qingji opened his divine martial eye. The suppression of a quasi-god over a king allowed him to see hundreds of miles away even in the world of darkness. Every time, Xing Qingji used his divine body to withstand the attack and then used the golden light blades to attack in a wide range. He did not need to pinpoint Yi Xing's exact location. He only needed to know where he was. Therefore, the black hole astrology did not affect this battle much. Xing Qingji laughed and said, Yi Xing, this is your last trump card. Ha! You're still far from being able to fight me. Chapter 879. Feng Junyue attacked Jin Hongqing at the same time. The heaven-shaking godly mighty sword carried the sound of a dragon's roar, and the sword light of 1,000 feet long cut Jin Hongqing into two halves. Then the two halves of Jin Hongqing's body were cut into pieces by the sword radiance. His flesh and blood scattered everywhere. Jin Hongqing's flesh and blood wriggled, but the speed of regeneration was slower than the speed of the sword radiance. In the end, he was cut into pieces. His vitality was exhausted, and he died. If it were any other time, Jin Hongqing wouldn't have been killed by Feng Hanqiu and Feng Junyue's attacks. However, he was shot by Yi Xing and lost more than 80% of his life force. He was already severely wounded, which was why Feng Hanqiu and Feng Junyue killed him. When Feng Hanqiu and Feng Junyue attacked Jin Hongqing, Wei Qingxian attacked as well. She attacked Star Silver Death and the other three who were running away. Wei Qingxian performed the speed secret skill of the Samsara Palace. She suddenly crossed hundreds of miles in the void. She clapped her hands, and the extremely cold Gang Qi instantly covered dozens of miles in front of her. Star, Silver, Death, and the other three were all enveloped in it. Many ice palm prints slapped at them. How dare a little king come after us? You're asking for death. Star Silver Death was infuriated. He shouted coldly and formed a saber art. The low-grade divine saber shone brightly. A saber aura cut the sky in half and arrived in front of Wei Qingxian in an instant. Other than Yi Xing, Star Silver Death had never taken a king seriously. Wei Qingxian was only a 7-star king. She wasn't weak and could be compared to a one-nirvana quasi-god with her low-grade divine weapon. However, a king was still a king. There was a fundamental difference between a king's body and a divine body. In Star Silver Death's eyes, he was going to cut Wei Qingxian in half. Wei Qingxuan's cold Gang Qi attack was going to be broken. Not far away, there was a teleportation formation that Star Silver Death and the others had set up beforehand. It could be used to travel between the sects quickly. As long as they escaped to the teleportation formation, they could return to the royal capital and fight the enemy with the dragon luck of the dynasty. With the speed of a quasi-god that could travel hundreds of miles in a breath, it would only take the blink of an eye for them to reach the teleportation array. Wei Qingxian didn't withdraw his palm in the face of Star Silver Death's attack. Instead, he opened his third eye in the center of his forehead and used the Samsara Divine Eye. Light of Reincarnation. A dazzling multicolored light shot out from the Samsara Divine Eye. It erupted with terrifying power and collided with the saber light in an instant. Wei Qingxian pushed the power of the light of reincarnation to its limits, and it was even more frightening than quasi-god Nirvana's full power attack. Although it couldn't compare to the power of Star Silver Death's saber, it still managed to dim the dazzling saber and reduce its power by 70 to 80%. The light of reincarnation dissipated in an instant. The saber aura fell and hit Wei Qingxian right in the middle of his body. His upper body was almost split open, and his head was also split in half. Star Silver Death snorted coldly. I can't kill you with one strike, you puny king tier. However, to Star Silver Death's surprise, his opponent's frigid aura didn't dissipate after being hit. The four of them were still affected by the frigid aura, and their speed was greatly reduced. The flesh on Wei Qingxuan's body wriggled, and the cut on her body healed in an instant. A supreme-grade imperial body. Star Silver Death, Feng Xiaoyuan, Feng Nongying, and Xian Yuan exclaimed at the same time. They had all been outer sect disciples of the Dark Star Temple and were very knowledgeable. Naturally, they knew that supreme-grade imperial bodies were immortal, just like divine bodies. They also knew how rare supreme-grade imperial bodies were. Whoosh! Darkness suddenly enveloped Star Silver Death and the others. Yi Xing traveled 1,000 miles in one breath. His murderous intent descended, and his black hole astrological form pulled the four of them into the world of darkness. Whoosh! At the same time, a black flame arrow shot through the world of darkness with terrifying power and penetrating energy. It shot toward Star Silver Death and the others. Star Silver Death and the others were not only trapped in the world of darkness, but the void around them also suddenly solidified. The power of space confinement imprisoned them. They should have reached the teleportation formation by now, but Wei Qingxuan's frigid aura greatly delayed them, giving Yixing time to condense another black flame arrow and kill them. His target was Xian Yuan. Light of Samsara. At that moment, Wei Qingxian activated her reincarnation divine eyes again. She unleashed her strongest attack. Dazzling multicolored light shot out and instantly pierced through space as she charged towards Feng Nongying. Moreover, Wei Qingxuan's hands were not idle either. She repeatedly struck out, and all of them were the ultimate killing moves of the Wind-Cold Ice Palm. The Wind-Cold Ice Palm was either a firm chop or a horizontal chop. Every strike was like a cutting blade, and the attack power was very terrifying. These strong and slashing ice palms all attacked Star Silver Death. As a second Nirvana quasi-god, Star Silver Death's suppression of Yixing's cultivation was very obvious. The black hole star's effect on him was much weaker than that of a first Nirvana quasi-god. The world of darkness couldn't block his vision. However, Feng Nongying, Feng Xiaoyuan, and Xian Yuan were greatly affected by the black hole star. Even with the star, they couldn't see more than 100 miles away. Whether it was Yixing's black flame arrow or Wei Qingxuan's light of samsara, they were both extremely difficult to defend against in the world of darkness. Without help, Feng Nongying and Xian Yuan would definitely be injured. Needless to say, the black flame arrow's attack power was also terrifying. Not only could it hurt the body, but it could also hurt the soul. Star Silver Death was already facing Wei Qingxuan's ice palms. Although he could block them and still had energy to spare, he could only save Xian Yuan or Feng Nongying. He couldn't block both the black flame arrow and the light of samsara. In terms of the threat of death, the black flame arrow was greater than the light of samsara. However, in Star Silver Death's heart, Feng Nongying was much more important than Xian Yuan. In the blink of an eye, Star Silver Death made up his mind to save his partner. Star Silver Death suddenly slashed out a peerless blade aura. It shone for thousands of feet and roared in the sky. In an instant, the power to bind space, the ice palms, and the light of samsara were all shattered by this blade. The terrifying attack of a second Nirvana quasi-god was indeed terrifying. However, no matter how strong this blade was, it couldn't turn around to destroy the black flame arrow. When Xian Yuan discovered the black flame arrow, he was already 100 miles away. He couldn't react in time and the black flame arrow pierced through his body. He immediately let out a shrill cry. Xian Yuan was terrified as his life force was rapidly draining away. Whoosh! 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 Star Silver Death grabbed Feng Nongying with one hand and Feng Xiaoyuan with the other. Taking advantage of the fact that the cold aura and the power to bind space had dissipated, he quickly rushed toward the teleportation formation. He knew very well that the longer they stayed, the greater the danger they would be in. If they didn't leave, they might all die here today. Star Silver Death couldn't take the three of them to the teleportation formation quickly. Since Xian Yuan was already severely injured, he had to give up on Xian Yuan. Star Silver Death. Xian Yuan roared and looked at the three people not far away. They suddenly disappeared into the distance. He was filled with despair. Chapter 880. A moment later, Star Silver Death brought Feng Xiaoyuan and Feng Nongying to the teleportation formation. Star Silver Death immediately activated the formation. At the same time, Yixing shot out a black flame arrow. It traveled thousands of miles and reached them in an instant. Bang! Star Silver Death took out his low-grade godly saber and cut the black flame arrow apart. A beam of light shot up into the sky and covered the three of them. The teleportation formation had been activated. Star Silver Death, Feng Xiaoyuan, and Feng Nongyin turned from solid to illusory and gradually disappeared. Xian Yuan, who did not manage to escape, was naturally attacked by Feng Hanqiu and Feng Junue. He was severely injured and soon died under the attack of two middle-grade godly weapons. The battle was over and the surroundings quieted down. However, the ravines that stretched for over 2,000 kilometers bore witness to the fierce battle that had just taken place. Even though it hadn't lasted for long, the destructive power of a clash between quasi-gods was terrifying. It was impossible to say how many mountains had been flattened and how many canyons had appeared. Moreover, the flesh and blood of three quasi-gods were scattered all over the ground. In the starry crescent land, quasi-gods of the first nirvana stood at the peak. It was rare for a quasi-god of the second nirvana to appear in tens of thousands of years. Moreover, it was difficult for a quasi-god of the second nirvana to kill a quasi-god of the first nirvana. Therefore, it was extremely rare for three quasi-gods to die at the same time in the history of the starry crescent land. Looking at the devastated ground, Feng Hanqiu's face was full of smiles. He said, "This time, three of their quasi-gods have died. Their strength has been greatly reduced and they can no longer compete with us. From now on, they can only hide in the inner city of the capital and rely on the luck of the dynasty to prolong their feeble existence." Ha! Feng Junue said regretfully, "It's a pity that three of them escaped. They even built a teleportation formation in the wilderness. How thoughtful." Feng Hanqiu said, "They were also afraid that Lu Xinghong and Qiu Minjun would come and join forces with us. With the teleportation array, they would have a way out. However, they probably never expected that Lu Xinghong and Yu Minjun would not come. Instead, it was junior brother Yixing who had greatly improved his strength and killed them." Feng Junue smiled. "Yes. If I did not see it with my own eyes, would not believe that Yixing's strength has reached such a level. That middle-grade godly bow is too powerful. If it were not for the teleportation formation, they would have died here." Yixing looked at the teleportation formation and said, "Their escape is only temporary. As long as they do not have a way to leave the starry crescent land, their lives will always be in my hands. One day, they will die without a doubt." Feng Hanqiu touched his beard and smiled. "That's right. Now, they can only rely on the luck of the dynasty to contend with us. If Junior Yixing's cultivation makes another breakthrough and his strength increases, he will reach a level that no one in the starry crescent land has ever reached. By then, even the dynasty's luck will not be able to stop Junior Yixing's archery." Yixing nodded. His cultivation still had a lot of room for improvement. Right now, he could not break through the dynasty's luck by force. However, what about after he reached the 8th level of the astral sea realm? By then, his strength would be on another level. Moreover, if he could reach the 8th level of the astral sea realm, so could Wei Qingxian. By then, it would not be difficult to break through the dynasty's luck. Yixing's lips curled up. "Then let's give them some time to breathe. When Qingxian and I reach the 8th level of the astral sea realm, we will settle the score with them." Feng Junue said, "There is no need to give them time to breathe. Junior Yixing, you and Junior Qingxian can cultivate as much as you want. Before you make a breakthrough, don't worry about these things. Senior Hanqiu and I, together with Lu Xinghong and Qiu Minjun, will break through the Golden Lion sect and the Dark Moon Palace first. These two sects do not have any quasi-gods. They will not be able to hold on for long with the dynasty's luck. Then, we will split into two groups. One will attack the Celestial Palace and the other will attack the Demon Ceiling Valley. They will not even have time to breathe." Speaking of Lu Xinghong and Qiu Minjun, it did not take long for them to arrive. Quasi-gods were the pinnacle of martial arts in the starry crescent land. They were very sensitive to the fluctuations of energy in the starry crescent land. For example, when quasi-gods fought, the fluctuations were very strong. Even if they were far away, other quasi-gods would still be able to sense it. Lu Jinghong and Qiu Minjun had rushed over because they sensed the quasi-gods' battle. When they learned that Xing Qingji, Jin Hongqing, and Xian Yuan, the three quasi-gods, had all fallen, they were shocked and could not believe it. Lu Jinghong and Qiu Minjun did not have any objections to Feng Junyue's suggestion. Both sides decided that Feng Hanqiu and Feng Junyue would attack the Dark Moon Palace, while Lu Jinghong and Qiu Minjun would attack the Golden Lion sect. After these two sects were broken, the Dark Moon Palace's territory would belong to the Big Dipper Sword sect, while the Golden Lion sect's territory would be divided equally between the Giant Spirit sect and the Moon Severing sect. After that, Feng Hanqiu and Feng Junyue continued to attack the Celestial Elephant Palace, while Lu Jinghong and Qiu Minjun went to attack the Demon Sealing Valley. Yixing and Wei Qingxian naturally did not participate in these matters. Another example would be the Fire Emperor. He was the strongest Fire Emperor amongst all the Fire Emperors. Similarly, he would cause the other Fire Emperors to be displeased. The Arrow Emperor was naturally the strongest amongst the Archery Emperors. This title was the pinnacle of archery. The Emperor was the Arrow Emperor, and after becoming a god, he would be the Arrow God. This was bound to cause the other Archery Emperors to be displeased. Wei Qingxian looked at Yixing and smiled. When Yixing was a 7 stars king, he already had the ability to kill quasi-gods. Now that he has broken through to the 8th level of the Astral Sea realm, his strength has reached a new level. Even in my previous life in the Reincarnation Palace, I have never seen such a powerful Archery Emperor. If Yixing can't be called the Arrow Emperor, then no one else in this world would dare to. If any Archery Emperors are displeased, then they can come and compete with Yixing. Junior sister Qingxian is right. If junior brother Yixing can't be called the Arrow Emperor, then who would dare to? Junior brother Yixing, the title of Arrow Emperor belongs to none other than you. Laughter was heard as Martial Monarch Vast Heaven and Martial Monarch Wind Sun descended from the sky and arrived at Yixing and Wei Qingshuan's residence. Yixing cupped his fists at the two. Senior brothers, please don't make fun of me. We are not making fun of you. The two of us are here to congratulate the Arrow Emperor on his breakthrough. His strength has improved tremendously, reaching a level that no one has ever reached in the Starry Crescent land before. The Vast Heaven Emperor and the Wind Sun Emperor restrained their expressions and cupped their fists at Yixing. Ever since Yixing came into contact with martial arts, he had been determined to reach the peak of martial arts. To cultivate martial arts, one had to cultivate to the peak. As a martial artist, one had to be the strongest. Therefore, Yixing was very satisfied with the title of Arrow Emperor. Since that was the case, Yixing did not hesitate to accept the title. Arrow Emperor Yixing said, after cultivating for more than 5 years, I have finally taken this step. My strength has indeed improved. I should go to the Celestial Elephant Palace to help Senior Brother Hanqiu and Senior Brother Junyue. The Vast Heaven Emperor smiled. With the Arrow Emperor making a move, he will naturally succeed and sweep the Starry Crescent land. The Wind Sun Emperor also said excitedly, the end of the Celestial Elephant Palace and the Demon Sealing Valley has arrived. The Arrow Emperor, Yixing, nodded at the two of them. Senior brothers, Qingxian and I will go now. Through the teleportation formation of the Big Dipper Sword sect, Yixing and Wei Qingxian arrived near the Celestial Elephant Kingdom. After becoming an 8-star emperor, Yixing's speed had increased. He could fly 1,000 miles in a breath with Wei Qingxian. Soon, they arrived at the Celestial Elephant Kingdom and saw Feng Hanqiu and Feng Junyue. Junior brother Arrow Emperor. Seeing Yixing, Feng Hanqiu waved from afar and laughed. Feng Junyue, who was attacking, also retreated. He turned into a stream of light and appeared in front of Yi Xing, junior brother Arrow Emperor. It's only been 5 years and you've already made a breakthrough. That's really fast. Obviously, the two had received the message from the vast Heaven Emperor and knew that Yi Xing had the title of Arrow Emperor. Yi Xing looked at the two and said, "Senior brothers, you've been attacking for 5 years. You've worked hard. Leave the rest to me." Feng Junhua laughed. "Senior brother Hancho, you've been here for 5 years. You've been so lonely and tired. However, I've been traveling all over the Starry Crescent land. I'm in a good mood." "Oh." Yi Xing looked at Feng Junhua in confusion. Feng Junhua said, "The Celestial Elephant Palace has been defending all this time. Naturally, they're not satisfied. So, Starsilver Death asked Xing Weihong to control the Dragon Fate to defend himself while he left the capital city. He wanted to attack the Big Dipper Sword clan without a quasi-god. Naturally, we couldn't let him get away with it. Now that I had the Heavenly Demon Divine Wings, my speed could only be faster than Star Silver Death's, and my attack power was even slightly higher than his. Now that I had made up for my lack of speed, Star Silver Death was no match for me. I've been chasing him for 3 years, running all over the Starry Crescent land. In the end, he still couldn't get rid of me. He had to go back to the Celestial Elephant Palace angrily to get rid of me." Ha! Feng Junhua laughed happily. He and Starsilver Death were enemies when they were in the Dark God Palace. However, Starsilver Death had been suppressing him. Later, he got a middle-grade divine weapon. His attack power was even better than Starsilver Death's. However, his speed was still not as good. After a long battle, Feng Junhua still lost. Now that he had the Heavenly Demon Wings to make up for his lack of speed, Feng Junhua finally turned the tables. After chasing Starsilver Death for 3 years, of course, he was happy. Chapter 884. Yi Xing and the other 3 destroyed the 5-colored light barrier as easily as crushing dry weeds. It didn't take long for them to arrive outside the 5-colored light barrier. Bang! 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 The attacks of the 4 landed on the 5-colored light shield one after another, causing a series of explosions. Something strange happened. Under the attacks of Yi Xing and the other 3, the formation could not withstand a single blow. However, the 5-colored light barrier rippled and blocked the attacks of the 4 people. Even Yi Xing's arrow attack was blocked and could not penetrate it. Star Silver Death stood in the sky above Xingxiang Palace, looking at Yi Xing and the other 3 through the translucent 5-colored light shield. He snorted. "I have said that you will never be able to break through my Xingxiang Palace. This 5 elements heaven ceiling formation is a complete level 6 formation. It is a treasure that the founder of my sect obtained from the Dark Star continent. It can withstand the attack of a quasi-god 3rd Nirvana. It has been guarding the center of the palace and can ensure that my Xingxiang Palace will exist forever in the Starry Crescent land. You will not be able to break through this formation." Feng Hanqiu frowned. A complete level 6 formation was too difficult to deal with. It had already exceeded the limits of the Starry Crescent land. In the Starry Crescent land, the cultivation of a martial artist could only reach the level of a quasi-god 3rd Nirvana. The Imperial Dragon luck that they had accumulated was also at the peak of a quasi-god 3rd Nirvana. Under normal circumstances, a formation that could withstand a quasi-god 3rd Nirvana was indeed impossible to break through in the Starry Crescent land. However, this was not a normal situation. Yi Xing and Wei Qingxian were not from the Starry Crescent land. Yi Xing's strength had exceeded the martial arts limits of the Starry Crescent land. However, with Yi Xing's quasi-god 3rd Nirvana level attack, it would be extremely difficult for him to break through the 5 elements heaven ceiling formation. Even a quasi-god fourth nirvana would need a certain amount of time to break through a level 6 formation. If the array was supplied with energy, it would be even more difficult to break the array. Inside the 5-colored light shield, Starsilver Death sneered and continued, this formation uses the primordial chi of gold, wood, water, fire, and earth as its energy source. When we first established this formation, our founder left behind a method to gather the primordial chi of 5 elements. After more than 78,000 years of accumulation, the amount of primordial chi of 5 elements that we have gathered is beyond your imagination. You want to exhaust the formation's energy to break it? Hee hee. You can attack it for 100 years, or even 1,000 years, but you won't be able to break it. Feng Hanqiu looked at Yi Xing anxiously.